Hello and welcome to the Saturday live stream. I hope everyone's doing well. I think got a few people trickling in. I'm going to say hello. Go ahead and say hello in the chat and please drop a like to support us. We are going to be reviewing these Bibles today. And just so to get straight to the point, we have the Novum Testamentum Graece, the Nestle Aland 28 edition, UBS5, United Bible Society edition. And if you are new to this topic and you're not really familiar with what these Bibles are, okay. If you're not really familiar with what these Bibles are, please no profanity in the chat. This is the critical text. So we are going to be going over some basics today about what the critical text is, why it is apparently missing verses, right? There are gaps in the verse numbers. And to start out, I just want to say that, this may, trigger warning. There are people who are very emotional about this particular topic. And the reason is that when you're reading the Bible and you're at a verse number, you go from the top of the chapter, verse 1, 2, 3, 4, and you get all the way to, verse 14, and then it jumps to verse 16, it looks like something's missing, right? And the important thing to keep in mind, obviously, is that the original Bible didn't have these verses, right? These verses were added centuries later. And when we review the 16 sort of famous textual variants that actually result in a jump from one verse skipping over a verse number, these are some of the most visible textual variants simply because of the gap in verses, right? They're not necessarily the most important textual variants, the most significant textual variants, just because they're missing verses. There are plenty of places in the critical text where a word or multiple words or a phrase is absent, where when you turn to a Bible, that namely the King James Bible, a New King James Bible, a Bible that is anchored in a more traditional version of the text. So thankfully the New American Bible Revised Edition retains the verse numbers, but left them empty with footnotes showing the missing verses in it. Yeah, and it's a question of, okay, Yashu Adoni, Tikanis. All my Greek students, hello, thank you for joining. So yeah, by the way, so the New American Bible Revised Edition, we're working on that. I've submitted a proposal to get that on Cross Bible. That's a hard one. They're very protective about that particular Bible. So these verses, even though they aren't the most significant, and frankly, a lot of the times their omission doesn't make a whole lot of difference in the meaning of the text, they are jarring, right? They're big omissions. And their two positions here are basically, if you are a supporter of the traditional textual tradition that was handed down from the Byzantine period and ended up in the, in the Textus Receptus tradition of the King James Bible, you're probably quite adamant that these verses need to be there and they should never have been removed, right? And I think there's an argument to be made that, perhaps textual critics and Bible scholars who came to the conclusion that these verses were probably later additions, perhaps they should have just bracketed them, right? So a lot of the times, and we're going to see this in different cases, you're going to see whether or not they, in some cases they are bracketed, right? You'll see that even though they're missing from some Bibles, they're bracketed in other Bibles. Is Logos the best Bible software? I don't know. I mean, in terms of Bible software that you can download and install on your computer, Logos is great. I've been using it for a long time. Accordance is also comparable, but Logos definitely, I think, is way more on the ball right now in terms of their marketing. So they market their product very well. They now have social media marketing. So you'll see that basically a lot of social media influencers, are plugging Logos right now because they're getting paid, right? So I think in some case, maybe they all are already users. And so they're just promoting a product that they like to use. In other cases, like I have insider information that there are some people that have admitted that they're maybe not entirely genuine about plugging the software. When you plug software, or if you plug any product, like if I ever have to plug a product on the Cross Bible channel, like in order to pay the bills, you gotta you do have it would be nice if everybody were honest, so like if I were to promote this cup, I'd be like, oh, this is a great cup, like I've dropped it never breaks. But sometimes you're not genuine, and you're just making a buck, right? But yeah, I mean, there are some great capabilities in Logos Bible software. And I try not to bring up other platforms. Hey, Marcel. I try not to bring up other platforms by name, because I don't want to say anything bad about anybody who's like a quote unquote competitor. I don't consider the desktop software to be a competitor of Cross Bible. I think Cross Bible is it's a browser-based tool, right? So it's only going to compete in a sense with other browser-based tools. So let's go ahead and open it up, and we're going to go to, let's see, boom. All right. So let me see if I can get this to bigger. Okay, so this is going to be a better view. I just need to make sure I also have an eye on the chat. All right, so from the homepage, the thing that we're going to kind of anchor ourselves in today is a blog post. So if you're on the homepage, if you don't launch, go right into the Bible right away, you're going to see that I have a blog page that has just a curated list of all of my YouTube videos with the text, the transcription of these videos. So we're going to be focused now on a video that I released in June of 2024. So this was a little over a year ago. And if anybody has watched it, if it's been a while, please rewatch it. I really benefit from the watch time on my videos if you want to go back and look at it. This was a video that I did after my video on the King James Bible, explaining exactly what the critical text is, Codex Sinaiticus and the critical text. And Codex Sinaiticus, it was the topic was trending because of the Wes Huff and Billy Carson debate, the Sinai Bible. So I added that to the title just to kind of pick up on that traffic. But basically, the idea here is just to give as neutral an explanation as I could about what the critical text is. So we got the early period, and then right here you have the index of all of the 16 quote unquote, omitted, missing verses, right? That's what we're going to be talking about today. So if you want to have a quick access to go and dig through these yourself, right? Or follow along with what I'm explaining now, you can come into this blog post, and you can see here there are hyperlinks that if we just open in a new tab, we're going to get right into Matthew 17:21. So we open this in a new tab, and these are going to load comparisons of 4 different Bible versions, and then it's going to jump to the verse that is the verse in question. So what we see here is we've jumped to Matthew 17, verse 21. On the left-hand side, we have the King James 1769 edition, which you can see has these brackets, right? It has these triangular brackets. And I'll see if I can maybe get this a little bigger. Okay, so we have, yeah, we got that. Okay, so we have triangular brackets here. So this Bible has marked this as being doubtful, spurious, right? Next to that, we have Stephanus's Textus Receptus, right? So this is the Greek that more or less matches what the King James Bible is presenting. And by the way, the formatting of this King James Bible, you can see these I guess you would call them guillemets, these brackets. We're in the process of licensing from Cambridge University Press a much cleaner, nicely formatted King James Bible. The interesting thing is that the King James Bible is in the public domain all around the world, but for reasons I won't get into, in the UK, the King James Bible is still under copyright, by the Crown, and Cambridge University Press has the ability to license it in the UK territory, but the version I'm getting is going to be for a worldwide publication that will allow us to create a more sort of easily readable version of the King James Bible. So that said, what we have right now is the 1769 edition and the 1611 edition. These are in the public domain. They're just not like very nicely formatted with, up-to-date spelling and things that I would like to better serve the, the community that appreciates the King James Bible. So we have the Textus Receptus and the King James on one hand, and you can see that verse 21 is there in those two versions. But then when you get to the New American Standard and the SBL Greek New Testament, which has a Greek text that's very similar to the critical text of these two Bibles, right? The NA28 and the UBS5. The SBL text will also create some brackets, but it'll bracket off textual variants, and we're currently implementing a textual apparatus that'll tell you kind of what the, that'll provide the explanations from the SBL regarding what manuscripts represent, what wording that you see in the Bible. But you can see that there's a gap. There's a gap. It jumps from verse 20 to verse 22 and omits verse 21. So as we approach this interesting puzzle, and as we observe that there are these 16 whole verses that have been removed, and basically a lot of the times people say that they were removed from modern translations. They'll say, why are modern translations missing verses? That's what really is missing is it's the underlying Greek text, the UBS5. The underlying Greek text has omitted the verses, and because the modern translations are translating from this text of the New Testament, they are also making editorial decisions to follow the Greek and skip the verse. Or in some, we're going to see in one case, the New American Standard brackets one of these verses, so it doesn't actually omit it, even though the Greek might omit it, right? So to take another step back, and let's just go into the timeline and make sure. Let me see if I'm okay. I'm sharing that properly. So if we go into the timeline, okay. So hold on a second. Let me pause for. Oh, okay. Yeah. So that was the favorite. Thank you. I'm glad that was your favorite video. Cross Bible should basically be Bible Gateway, but for people more serious about textual criticism. Yeah. And, they just haven't. The thing is, like a lot of these other platforms that shall not be named, they're great, but they were like built in the 90s, right? Like they don't really, they don't improve very quickly. Whereas Cross Bible is improving very quickly. And that's interesting that the KJV is not really public domain in the UK. No, yeah, it's not public domain in the UK. And so that can be a problem. And it had a section on the coherence-based genealogical method. So the coherence-based genealogical method, we will definitely have to do a separate, stream. And I'll make separate videos and content on the coherence-based genealogical method. But basically, if we're looking at what we're comparing, really are Bibles from these eras, right? We're comparing Bibles from basically the 16th and 17th century that then started to change in the 18th and 19th century. And by the 20th and 21st century, we had very different flavors of the Bible, right? So here in this tradition, so 16th, 17th century, you get the beginning, the emergence of the Textus Receptus. That was really just perpetuating the tradition that came all the way back here. All these red manuscripts, like these are all in the Byzantine tradition. And when the versification system was invented for these Bibles, it was invented on the basis of this particular kind of text. So the verses that were there that later got omitted, the numbering was laid out for those particular Bibles, right? Whereas once you hit the modern critical editions, and you get Lockman and Tregelles and Tischendorf and Westcott Hort. And these are Bibles we have in Cross Bible, by the way, that you can pull up and compare. You're going to see that if we look these up in those Bibles, these verses are going to be dropped, right? And they're going to be dropped mainly because even though they are in all of these red, majority text, that's what it's called, the majority text, right? Even though they're in the majority of manuscripts, because the earliest manuscripts that textual critics began to favor, especially these ones that are in blue, that are in the Alexandrian text type, that are categorized as Alexandrian and Western, because the earliest, small scraps and fragments that we were able to find, including these old Bibles, Codex Sinaiticus, Codex Vaticanus, Codex Alexandrinus, because those verses are not represented in these early manuscripts, the conclusion in some of these cases was they must not have been original. They must have been added over here later in this tradition. Now, with each of these examples, we're going to have to approach them and say, what you have to consider two scenarios. Either, like let's just say in the Byzantine tradition, we got a scribe who's producing this manuscript, right? He's producing this manuscript based on, a Bible that he has in front of him that's maybe in this group over here, right? Like a Bible that's like one of these. Maybe it's 100 years old, right? Maybe it's 200 years old. So an ancient manuscript that's kind of falling out of use, and he needs to copy it so that to preserve it for posterity. You have to ask yourself, well, in most cases, these verses that have been omitted, we can assume safely that they probably used to be in they were in the earlier manuscript that he's copying from, right? He sees that verse there, he copies it, right? That's a pretty easy scenario to think of. But at some point, if you go far enough back in the chain, the presumption is that eventually you would get to a point where that verse was not there. So there must have been a reason to add it. If the critical text is correct, if it's omitted for good reason because it's a later edition, these are all omitted because they're considered to be later editions, there has to be a compelling reason why it would be added in the first place, right? So with each of these, we're going to ask ourselves, what would be the reason why a scribe writing somewhere early in this tradition, presumably early, would encounter this gap in the text, or just see the text and have a reason to insert new wording? Does he want to clarify something? Was it a marginal note? Did he take a note in the margin and then a later scribe came along and inserted it, right? Is he comparing the Gospel of Matthew to the Gospel of Luke and trying to harmonize? Like what would be the theory for why it would be added, as opposed to what would be the theory why it was removed, right? And if you come into these earlier traditions, or at least earlier in terms of the dating of the manuscripts, if you come into an earlier tradition and you see that there is a gap in the text, you have to ask yourself, okay, if that verse or those words were in a predecessor, if the scribe over here in the 4th or 5th century is copying a 3rd century manuscript and he sees the text there in front of him and he chooses to skip over it or omit it purposefully or accidentally, what would be the reason for that, right? Like, why would he take it out? Does it say something he's not comfortable with? And if in a lot of the times, the textual critics that we're going to be looking through, we're going to be looking at Bruce Metzger's The Textual Commentary of the Greek New Testament. I've sort of summarized a lot of these explanations from there, and Kurt Alond and Barbara Alond's The Text of the New Testament. And these are sort of, they're somewhat dated. And also Bart Ehrman and Bruce Metzger's The Text of the New Testament, right? So these are really great books. They're very, fairly accessible to lay people. If you don't know Greek, you might miss out on some of it. But a lot of these resources may be considered dated by some people, right? And may be considered obsolete. I have received feedback on the timeline of the Bible saying, oh, the text types, these text types are not real and nobody accepts them anymore. And we've moved on, right? And to the point that that's being made in the comments, the NTG website which houses the CBGM recently revealed mark phrase 352, which seems to be updated or corrective phase to mark phase 3.5 that was out since 2021. That's interesting. Oh, okay. So let's we got a timeline poster vote. So Russian Spy Sleazeball wants a timeline poster. And then a Google Doc. So do you have a Google Doc of all sources and research relating to Christianity? I'm a student of Deconstruction Zone. If you go, so let's skip over to study resources. I have curated a list here of Bibles in English, biblical studies, resources, history books, studies in the Gospels, ancient Greek for anybody learning ancient Greek, the Septuagint, textual criticism, including these books that I just showed over here, Bibles in original languages, Bible commentaries, modern Greek, language studies books, linguistics books, and books on Hebrew. So I'm working on continually improving this database. But if you would be kind enough to browse this list and order any books from here, we are Amazon affiliates, so we get a small commission from those purchases. So that's what I would recommend. So it's not a Google Doc; it's a bit more dynamic. And also, let's see. Going back to the timeline. And you can order a print version of this timeline if you want. So going to the sorry, let's skip out of this real quick, just so I make sure I'm plugging everything I need to plug. The Cross Bible Store. If you go to the Cross Bible Store, you can order a timeline of the Bible poster, and I will print one out. I don't have any lying next to me. I'll print one out and ship it to you. So we already have one vote today for the timeline of the Bible poster. We got 2 votes for the timeline of the Bible poster. So this is a weekly giveaway. I will be sending one of you, the winner. I will be sending a free timeline Bible poster. And also make sure you join Discord. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to open up Discord, and I'm going to create a new Discord link for anybody who wants to get into the welcome channel. So I'm going to drop a link to Discord right now. And Discord. So get into Discord. If you're one of the people who's voting to get a timeline poster, make sure you jump into the Discord so that if you win, you can connect with me directly once you've joined the server. And I will get your mailing address and ship out one of these posters. But if you are not one of the lucky winners, if you purchase the poster, it's $35, $10 for shipping. That really helps us. It helps every poster sale, just gives us a little boost. And of course, there is the billing page, which will give you access to our paid features. So we do have a patron tier for people who want to support us on the highest level and help us develop new features. We have a standard tier that we're putting some more advanced features behind. And we have a basic tier for $5 a month that's going to give you access to some of the capabilities and features that I'm going to be showing you today. So please get on that if you're not already. This is the beta version. So when you are using the notes features, the bookmarks features, there are certain things that I think in the next week or two, I'm going to be making some content that's going to be announcing some really cool stuff that we have in the pipeline. But for now, it's a little bit experimental. But we have this cool advanced search feature that you can use to search for, words in the Bible. It's pretty darn fast. So you search for love and you can see like this word that appears in all of these different versions. And I think you can also search for Greek terms. Yep, boom, and it'll give the terms in the Greek. And then the advanced search panel. This is not fully built out yet, but you're going to be able to perform advanced searches through different versions, books, chapters, verses, and search your notes and search your bookmarks. So you're going to have like basically a dashboard where when you're going through the Bible and you're bookmarking and note-taking and highlighting, all of that is going to be consolidated into a dashboard where you can easily pull that stuff up later. So back to the timeline. Yes, back to the timeline. So what we're going to be exploring now are the differences between these 2 different sort of categories of modern printed Bibles, right? Which is basically the King James, which is still, a very popular Bible. The King James and all of these Bibles that are labeled as red, and the New King James, and the Greek Orthodox Bible, and Bibles that are going to be more conservative in preserving the versification as is, right? They don't want to skip verses. Whereas all of these modern Bibles that are marked in this sort of dark gray category, they are eclectic Bibles. These are Bibles that are the result of textual criticism that are being translated from underlying critical Greek editions where these verses are omitted, right? So we're going to be looking mainly at the New American Standard Bible right here, right? The New American Standard Bible is an offshoot of the ASV. And we're going to be maybe delving a little bit into the, we could check the ESV at times. We could check the NIV. The NRSV updated edition, by the way, I keep mentioning that we're about to release it. We got a data dump of XML for the NRSV Bible that is very difficult to parse. We're working on it. So give us another, I don't know. I don't want to make any promises on the stream, but within a couple of weeks, hopefully we're going to have our first initial release. If you're signed up for free, go to crossbible.com and make sure, if you're not already registered, just go sign up for free, create a profile, check that to opt into the mailing list so that you get an update of the announcement. And make sure you're following us, make sure you're subscribed on the YouTube channel, make sure you're following us like on Facebook and X and Twitter and Instagram, wherever you want to follow us. All of our social links are in the footer on the website. Make sure that you're following us for updates, because we will probably blast out updates on all of our channels, including here on YouTube, when we release the NRSV. We have a lot of Bibles in the pipeline. I've personally contacted all of these Bible societies, and we're growing our collection. And we're also releasing Bibles in foreign languages. So we're going to have a German Bible soon. We're going to have a Portuguese Bible soon. The latest and greatest editions of those. So these, and all of these modern Bibles are based on the critical text. So the two versions of the critical text that I had in front of me, right? Like these ones. So we have the Nestle Aland 28, which is right here. So you can see this is from the 21st to the 28th edition. And then we have the UBS 5. So the UBS 5 and the Nestle Aland 28 are are the latest editions of the critical text. Are you going to have concordance in Cross Bible in the future, or a reference a concordance like Strong's? Yeah. I mean, there are some public domain resources we could spend time on to implement a concordance, which, Strong's Concordance does have a glossary that's not really very good. It has sort of short glosses of definitions, kind of. Strong's, it's like a dictionary, and it's not super useful. The first thing we're going to be implementing is Thayer's lexicon. So Thayer's lexicon is really, it's not the most modern lexicon, but, and oh, by the way, let me show you. If you go onto the timeline of the Bible, not a lot of people know about this. I have added some tabs to the bottom here, and you can actually go in and explore my timeline of Greek. This is super rough. I'm going to be making this look a little nicer, but I just figured I might as well share some of this material that I use to produce video content on the history of Greek. Hebrew, I have the timeline of Hebrew. I have a timeline of English. I'm going to start expanding and having more timelines than just the Bible timeline, even though the Bible timeline is really the crown jewel. So this is all stuff that people can go in and play with right now. And I will be continually improving these resources. And so the Thayer's lexicon is going to be in this category under biblical Greek lexicons. And you can see that basically Strong's Concise Dictionary of Words in the Greek New Testament is connected to, so basically Thayer's is like a wrapper around Strong's, right? Like the Thayer's definitions are tied to the Strong's Concordance IDs, so that you can basically, it gives you a way to connect the definitions to every single word in the New Testament. And then also I'm going to apply Thayer's to the Old Testament and connect it to the Greek Septuagint, so that you'll be able to pull up definitions of words. So I think this is actually going to be a much more valuable feature than the than just Strong's Concordance. Strong's Concordance is an outdated resource. The reason why you see it everywhere, the reason it's so ubiquitous, is just because it's been in the public domain for so long, and people have built so many tools around it, because it's free. So it's like it's a free for all. But I don't really see a lot of value in spending a lot of time on Strong's Concordance when Thayer's lexicon is much better. And then obviously the BDAG lexicon is going to be our next target, if we can negotiate that. Thank you, Timothy Wright. I have the Cross Bible bookmarked. All right. So yeah, definitely bookmark Cross Bible. And keep your eyes peeled for new features. So we're going to dig into the Nestle Aland 28 and the UBS 5, and note that the text of these three Bibles, including the Society of Biblical Literature Greek New Testament, these are all under the umbrella of what is called the Critical Text, CT, right? These are all the same Bible. Like, they have basically the exact same text at the top. So in the top section, there's no difference between these Bibles. In the bottom section is the textual apparatus. Now, if you compare the textual apparatus of the UBS 5 with the textual apparatus of the Nestle Aland 28, the Nestle Aland 28 textual apparatus is super dense, right? It lists basically a ton of manuscripts with abbreviations, telling you all of the different varieties of textual variants that are found in manuscripts that may or may not be represented here on this timeline, right? So one of the things that you can do if you are somebody who has access to these resources and somebody who is at least somewhat familiar with Greek, when you're looking at the textual apparatus and you're basically seeing that, okay, these are footnotes, basically. These are textual footnotes that are saying, oh, all right, so the wording that I see in the body of the text is supported by these manuscripts, and then these are alternative textual variants are supported by other manuscripts. When it gives you an abbreviation of or a symbol that represents a manuscript, you can use the timeline of the Bible here to look that up, right? You can come in here, you can hit Command F, and you can search for like one of these symbols. I mean, some of them might be in Greek, for example, like the theta, like that's Korodethi, right? So you can see this is Codex Korodethi, right? Or you can look up like Sinaiticus, right? This search feature is very powerful. I think a lot of people might not, when they're browsing Cross Bible or they're looking at the Bible timeline feature, they may not realize that this is available, but just Command F should open up that search panel and let you quickly jump to, like, for example, if you saw in the textual apparatus a citation that said 565, right? Well, if you were just sort of like, you didn't know what 565 was, you can come in here and type 565 and jump to it. Right. So again, lots of functionality here that you just, need to explore Cross Bible yourself to get familiar with. But also, I'm going to be doing live streams. I'm going to be doing videos. I'm going to be doing tutorials and explainers. And we're going to put more tutorials and explainers on the website to guide people through these features as we release them. Like, they're going to be hot off the press. That's what the Discord is for. So make sure, again, I dropped the Discord link in the description. Make sure you're on Discord if you're going to be a power user of Cross Bible, an early adopter of Cross Bible. They just have different apparatuses, since the Nestle Aland is more comprehensive and the UBS is for translators. Exactly. Right. So the Nestle Aland UBS started sharing their text by the 26th edition and the UBS 3rd, if I can recall. If you go, so in the description, there's that link to the video that, again, if you come over into the blog post, you can see this is the video up here. So what you can do is you can come onto the blog. You can play the video in the browser here, right? You can hit the play button and you can listen to the audio or watch it. And then you can actually follow along with everything that's being said if you're the kind of person that prefers to read, or you can just read it. So that my goal is to make sure that this is accessible to everyone. And again, these are the hyperlinks for the verses we're going to be reviewing. So back to the timeline. As it was mentioned in the comments, the UBS text, the Nestle Aland text, and then later the SBL text, they're all aligned in terms of what they say. It's just, if you are a Bible translator, right? Sometimes in some situations, you might want to look at the apparatus, right? Like if you're translating the body of the text from Greek into English or Swahili or whatever language you're translating into, sometimes it's helpful to have that little asterisk or the footnote, go into the textual apparatus and see, there's like another, maybe, for example, if you're a translator, you might be putting a footnote in that foreign language Bible, right? To indicate that some manuscripts say X, Y, and Z, right? Like some manuscripts say something different. This is something that we need more of. We shouldn't just be blindly translating the text. If there are other textual traditions that have slightly different wording, or maybe some manuscripts omit this verse, or if you are a translator and you're following along the UBS5 text and you are skipping a verse, right? Let's say like it skips over verse 14 and you're going to go from verse 13 to 15. You might want to put a footnote explaining yourself to the reader who is attentive, who sees that there's a gap in the verses and wants to know why is it missing, right? So the formatting that the United Bible Society has implemented for its version of the text is meant to be more simplistic, so that if you're a Bible translator, you don't necessarily need to know every jot and tittle of every manuscript in the in-depth format that the Nestle Aland text presents it, right? And this is something that for me, it took me so long to kind of wrap my head around this stuff, that it part of the birth of this timeline was just me creating this for myself, initially as an Excel spreadsheet, to just try to figure out what was going on, right? Like to just try to like visually represent how all of these different Bible versions were connected and what was going on. So these three texts that are under the umbrella of the critical text, I do not have Cross Bible does not have currently a license to display the UBS or Nestle Aland text, right? We're working on it, or these come from the German Bible Society, and we are a partner now of the German Bible Society. So we will be presenting very soon. We'll be releasing a German Bible that we've been graciously licensed through the German Bible Society. We will be represented at the Society of Biblical Literature Conference coming up in November in Boston. So if you're going to be at the SBL conference, come say hi to us. We're going to be booth 812. And we're going to be continuing conversations with the various Bible publishers and Bible societies who are licensing Bibles to us, who are enthusiastic about partnering up with Cross Bible, who like the work we're doing and are willing to support us with licenses to these Bibles. But these are probably going to be premium resources. So I don't know if they're going to be, we just simply can't make them publicly available for free. We will not be allowed to make them publicly available for free, but they will be very, very useful for scholars and for translators who are going to potentially be able to translate the Bible right on our platform. I think they might not let you show the NA as of today. Kind of hard to find any other places where they have the NA28. Other than German Bible Society's website. Yes, they you're correct. They will not let me. They will not let us just post their Bible. First of all, we need to get access to all of that data. All of the Bible data is stored in XML. And every time we put a new Bible up, it's because we have officially licensed the Bible, received permission to display the Bible, and received access to the files that we then need to parse and code into the website so that they can be presented in our verse by verse format. And also in a publisher compliant format, which is the next phase of Cross Bible, where you're going to see properly paragraphed with, chapter breaks and headings and things that are currently not part of this version, this beta version of Cross Bible. So we're working on all that. It's a very early stage for us to, of development. And again, anyone who is able to go and sign up for the $5 a month plan, please do so. You can also support us on Patreon. We have the Patreon account. We are working on creating patron-only access to pre-released content. So please either support us on Patreon or ideally sign up for a subscription for the software. It's free to register. You can register for free to get access to some initial features that we're going to go over. But the custom Bible study features are $5 a month. And the more people we can get signed up for that, using it, getting on Discord, giving us feedback. We're in a development cycle right now, and we really need your feedback, and we need people supporting us. So please come, show your support in any way you can. And you could even even purchasing a poster helps. Every little bit helps. So the Editio Critica Major, the ECM, is kind of like these two Bibles, but much, much more comprehensive. And it's a project that hasn't yet been completed. So they don't have the full Bible yet. They're still working on it. And the ECM text is going to be the basis on which the UBS 6 and the Nestle Aland 29 are going to be using for the books that are completed so far: the Gospel of Mark, Acts of the Apostles, Revelation. I think they've done all the Gospels. They're working through it. So so this is the future, right? The ECM is the future. The coherence-based genealogical method is the future. This is the way that, so why do we need a new Bible? And that's a good question. Why do we need a new Bible? So part of it is that is that the textual analysis, the goal of these Bibles, right? Like, what is the purpose of the critical text, right? Like, why does it need to be critical? Like, what's like in a nutshell, what is going on? What's going on is that the Bible that has been traditionally used over the last few hundred years, that, that the King James, basically the King James Bible and its successors, had textual issues, according to, textual scholars, where, as we're going to see in this video, there were verses that appear to have been added. Now, if you take the other position, you're going to say, no, those verses were removed. Like, they were removed from the manuscripts that the critical text is relying on, and the critical text is wrong. That's a valid, point. Those are the two sides of the argument. So the reason we needed new Bibles in the 19th and 20th century is because the tide of Bible scholarship was going away from the Byzantine tradition and the Textus Receptus tradition that gave us the King James Bible, the Bishop's Bible, the Geneva Bible, the Great Bible, right? Like, all of these foundational English Bibles, and many Bibles in foreign languages, as you can see here, like lots of modern Greek Bibles in all different kinds of languages, in Latin, French, Spanish, Polish, Hungarian, Dutch, Italian, Spanish. Like, the whole world basically got on the same page for many centuries with regards to the original Greek text. This was a reconstructed text, right? So the question of why we would need a new Bible could also have been asked to Erasmus, right? Okay, so I'm KJV onlyist. Well, thank you, Timothy Wright. If you are KJV onlyist, to any of my KJV only friends in the chat, this is not an attack on the King James Bible. This is not, like, I'm not personally going to be representing any of these missing Bible verses as being omitted because I know for a fact, or I have a strong belief that they are later additions. I'm simply trying to distill the scholarship of, like, explaining why they're missing, right? Like, what is the logic of taking them out of the Bible? Because they've been there for so long, right? So it is, if you're someone who leans on the side of tradition, then, first of all, the question of why we would need a new Bible, well, Erasmus thought we needed a new Bible because when he received these, when he analyzed the Greek manuscripts he had access to that were all in this textual tradition, which you can see that the red lines that connect Erasmus's Greek New Testament to the manuscripts that he used are all red, right? So you can see he had access to minuscule 2, minuscule 2817, minuscule 9, minuscule 2814, 2815, and so on. So he was comparing the Greek text to the Latin text, hoping that he could just align them, right? Assuming that the Latin text was a translation of the Greek, so they should align pretty easily, right? Like, you can just take a ruler and put them up next to each other. And that is when he came to realize that, oh, they're actually different, right? There are things here in the Greek that aren't in the Latin, and vice versa. And there are things that don't quite line up and don't translate well. His original project to, just update the Vulgate and update the Latin in reference to the Greek, and try to, compete with the Complutensian polyglot, that didn't work out too well, right? Like, he ended up performing textual criticism, right? Comparing different manuscripts and figuring out what wording he was going to use for his Bible that ended up being the foundation of the Textus Receptus, right? Which was then revised by Stephanes. It was revised by Beza and the Elzevirs, and eventually, the Stephanes New Testament in the Textus Receptus tradition is what we're going to be using today to sort of anchor ourselves in that tradition. So the question could easily be asked to them, obviously, so the King James version was a new Bible once, right? So the issue of saying, oh well, the one Cardinal Jimenez, if I remember, that was the Complutensian Polyglot that Erasmus was beat to market. He got his Bible out first, but the Complutensian Polyglot actually was a little bit more eclectic and arguably a better version than Erasmus's version. So Erasmus had to ask himself the question in the 17th century, why a new Bible? And his answer was because the Latin and the Greek do not align, right? And we need a Greek version. We need a pure, his project was a Greek version, right? He was not translating. But Luther translated the German Bible from, Erasmus. And the King James Bible, and this is, by the way, I received some feedback on this. So like if you've seen older videos, you may notice that this sort of scheme is a little different, right? Because we had obviously Tyndale, the first English translation in this textual tradition, right? In the Textus Receptus tradition, we had the Geneva Bible kind of updating Tyndale, then the Coverdale Bible that fed into the Great Bible, which then fed into the Bishop's Bible, and then the King James, King James is kind of a reaction to the Bishop's Bible, but it also incorporated a little bit. It was a little bit in reaction to the Geneva Bible. There are people who have come through and come onto the channel and commented and given me feedback about like kind of how to arrange this hierarchy a little better to visually represent the textual dependencies of the early English versions, because for the most part, they are all going back to Tyndale, and Tyndale is also using wording from, he's also using a lot of wording from Wycliffe. Like Wycliffe is really down here, translations from the Latin Vulgate. You can see Wycliffe in the 14th century. That's really the OG English Bible, right? Like that's the foundation. It's just Wycliffe is over here in the green group representing the Latin Vulgate and the Western text tradition that the Latin Vulgate is based on. So again, going back to the question, why do we need a new Bible? We every generation gets a new Bible, right? What's the difference between the Textus Receptus and the Byzantine text form? Good question. So the Textus Receptus that was initially created by Erasmus and later refined by different, editions, Stephanus, Beza, Elzevir's. That tradition is a distillation of the Byzantine text, right? So he's basically going back and looking at a select few Byzantine manuscripts that were fairly recent, close to his time, of like we're talking about 12th century, 13th century manuscripts, right? Like these manuscripts in this group right here, ones that were still in decent shape when Erasmus was working, right? So he was not just copying, like if he were just going to copy from one manuscript to another, that would be more or less like that wouldn't really be textual criticism. What he did was he gathered a group of them and determined, based on the skills that he had at the time for textual criticism, what wording to put together to make his Bible, right? To some extent, any of the scribes who we don't know who they are, right? The anonymous scribes who produced all of these copies in the Byzantine tradition in the Byzantine Empire before the Byzantine Empire fell to the Turks, they would have also, to some extent, been engaged in some form of textual criticism, right? Because a lot of the times we do see that ancient manuscripts of the Bible have marginal notes, right? The scribes are aware of competing traditions when they're copying, right? So they're not just like, okay, I have a text over here and I'm going to copy it word for word. Well, sometimes they are comparing 2 or 3 different versions that may say slightly different things and may warrant like adding a marginal note saying like, this might be included here. I don't know. I think this is original, but those are sort of the early versions of what would be a modern textual apparatus. So the question of why create even a new copy of the Bible is pretty clear that, because older copies fall apart, you need to update it, right? Nowadays, you can run it on the printing press, right? So I can create an exact duplicate of this by just copying it on a printing press. Before the invention of the printing press, they were all copied by hand. And sometimes people made mistakes when copying by hand. Sometimes if your eyes are going from one column to another, or from one manuscript to another, you're creating your copy, you're going back and forth. If you do that for enough hours, your eye is going to skip over a line and you're going to omit an entire line, right? That happens. Now, thankfully, we have enough copies that textual critics today are able to go through, and when they see that missing line, they can realize that, oh, that was the result of homoteleuton or something. You know, like they have various terms to define what is going on when a copyist makes an error that results in the dropping a word, duplicating a word, dropping a line, duplicating a line. So the more data that we compile, the more manuscripts that get discovered and indexed, especially the older ones, and especially all of these Egyptian papyri that they've unearthed, the more we get of that data, the more it gets digitized and analyzed, the better, the more refinements that we can make on the scholarly editions of the Bible that translators are going to be relying on. And what's happened with the coherence-based genealogical method is basically they have put together a computer system that has the ability to process the information a lot more efficiently than the old school textual critics did when they were just doing this by hand, right? Like, it used to be all manual labor, right? Like, people would go through, like, I mean, if you watch that video, there are pictures of the Nestle Aland committee, right? And they just got, they're in front of a table that's covered in books, and they're like, you know, they're digging through it. Like, that was the old school days. Nowadays, they still do that, but they have a computer working behind the scenes that is running various algorithms on the textual variants to determine what is the pre-genealogical coherence. That's one of the terms that's used in the coherence-based genealogical method between two different manuscripts, like manuscripts on this that you might find here, like the different, Codex Freerianus versus Codex Alexandrinus. What are the similarities between those two manuscripts as a whole? So in other words, if they agree or disagree, like which is more likely to be the original reading in that particular part. And then they're able to construct genealogies similar to the timeline of the Bible for every individual reading that is in question. And those are called stemmata, right? So they have, if you go on to the, I'll produce more content that reveals this. But again, if you go on to the blog post, you're going to learn, again, okay, sorry, it's right over here. This is the blog post. So go to this blog post, read the blog. If you haven't yet, please watch the whole video from beginning to end and really educate yourself on this. If you are, again, we got people in the audience who are King James onlyists, and that's great. There's nothing like, I personally, for example, like I have the Byzantine text form edition right here. This is a reader's edition. I cut my teeth on this version when I was learning Greek because it has nice glosses in the footnotes. Yeah, so this has a lot of glosses. And this text, so in my early days, like before Cross Bible, before I even did all this, I was comparing, side by side. And this is part of why I built Cross Bible. I built software that allowed me to compare the critical edition of the Byzantine text, the Robinson Pierpont, and Robinson Pierpont. Let me go back to the timeline of the Bible just so I can make sure I get these straight. So I was comparing the Byzantine text with the Textus Receptus. And to the question of what's the difference, they are very, very similar. Okay, like if you compare, for example, if you compare the Elsevier Bible, which is basically a Greek edition of the Textus Receptus that has been aligned with the King James, where all of the Greek readings that are in this Bible match up with the King James to basically reconstruct a Greek text that aligns as closely to the King James as possible. That would have been sort of the hypothetical predecessor of the King James, the text underlying the King James Bible. That is the Elsevier Bible. That is considered the Textus Receptus, the best version of the Textus Receptus in relation to the King James Bible. If you compare that Greek text to the majority text edition of Hodson and Farstad or Robinson Pierpont. Robinson Pierpont is the RP edition, is the one that we have in Cross Bible. So that's the Greek New Testament according to the Byzantine majority text. They line up very, very closely. I don't have an exact percentage. I don't know if it's like 98%, but like it is a exceptional occasion if you compare those two versions side by side, where you would potentially find any differences. And you can do that, by the way, in Cross Bible. So if you're in Cross Bible, and let's say you're looking at Stephanus's New Testament. So this is Stephanus's Textus Receptus. You can compare side by side. I mean, I'm not going to ruin that little comparison. I'm going to show you guys what it would look like. So let's say I'm going to look up in the King James Bible. I'm going to look up Mark 1, right? I'm going to go to Mark 1, and you can see for yourself. You don't have to ask me the difference. You can just check for yourself, right? So I'm going to look up Mark 1 in the King James, in the beginning of the gospel of Jesus Christ, Son of God, as it is written in the prophets. Behold, I send a messenger before thy face, which shall prepare thy way before thee. So if you add another version, it's this button right here, you can then compare the King James. Well, by default, it's going to load the ASV, right? And you're going to see that all of a sudden it's like, even as it is written in Isaiah the prophet, right? That this is like a pretty well-known textual variant, Isaiah the prophet versus in the prophets. So these are the two different, basically, Byzantine tradition is in the prophets, right? That's what we get in the King James. Alexandrian sort of text critical favored edition, it's going to say in Isaiah the prophet, because textual critics have concluded that the oldest Bibles have Isaiah by name. And it's not really clear why Isaiah would, it's clear why later scribes would take Isaiah the prophet and make it in the prophets, because the quotation is coming from different prophets. Whereas it's not really clear how it would go in the other direction. This is the sort of text critical logic. Like why, if in the prophets is more original, why would you take that and like replace it with Isaiah the prophet when there are two prophets? Like there's logic in only one direction. Now that's this isn't my opinion. This is just some kind of distilling the scholarship. So if you compare the King James to, I'm going to select Stephanus, right? So we're going to compare the King James to an edition of the Textus Receptus. These are going to align, right? It's going to say entis prophetas, right? Like in the prophets. But then if you come in here and let's just say we want to compare the RP edition, we want to get the Byzantine. I have a drop down menu open. You just can't see it in StreamYard. The statistical, sorry, I sometimes have trouble finding it. Elsevier, Tischendorf, Westcott Hart. I have so many Greek Bibles by now. Byzantine text form. Okay, so here's the Byzantine text form. So the question that we got in the chat was, what is the difference? Right, let me see. Okay, what's the oldest version of the Gospel of Mark? Ooh, that's a good question. So what is the difference between, there's so many. What's the difference between, I'm not going to pull it up. What's the difference between the Textus Receptus and the Byzantine text form? Not much difference, right? If you compare these side by side, word by word, you get entis prophetes, idou ego apostello ton angelon proprosopusos kateskevastin odonso embrosensu. Absolutely word for word agreement across the board. Like you win an award basically for when you are able to find a difference comparing these side by side. They're almost exact, right? Whereas if you pull up the SBL next to them, all of a sudden you're going to start noticing these differences. Like these are the main textual categories. So the Textus Receptus is a derivation. It is a branch coming out of the Byzantine text, of the majority text. And they are going to be, for the most part, in lockstep. So these are both critical editions, right? Like Erasmus was trying to reconstruct to the best of his ability and to the limitations of his knowledge and resources, what would have been the original Greek text. That's what everybody wants. They want to know what did the author write, or at least what did the earliest copies of the original text say, not what did later scribes, change that then became popular, right? Everybody wants that. That's what everybody wants to achieve. Everybody's like in an earnest quest to reconstruct that text. We do that to the best of our ability. And to the question of why do we need a new Bible? Well, we need the new Bible because 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 the scholarship continues to improve and continues to, or if you think it's improvement, they continue to update their Bible, right? So as the Bible updates, we then need new translations to update the Bible according to the new Greek text, the Nestle-Aland 29 and the UBS6, and then the Nestle-Aland 30 and the UBS7. We could discover a whole bunch of manuscripts somewhere in the near future that's going to probably, I would not bet money on the idea that we will ever discover manuscripts that are going to drastically contradict the current wording that we have reconstructed in the New Testament. Every time there is a new discovery of manuscripts, they tend to corroborate the critical text. If we all of a sudden discovered a whole bunch of manuscripts that corroborated the Byzantine text in certain readings, or the methodology is refined to the point where we're beginning to corroborate certain Byzantine readings that were previously considered to be inferior, that's happening right now. Right, so the ECM, the Editio Critica Maior, that's going to be the foundation of future Bibles. In a few select instances, they're actually reverting back to some of the readings that were in the King James, that were sort of poo-pooed for a couple of centuries and now have come back in vogue. So this is something that I think for people who are King James onlyists, they see this development, right? They see this a Bible that's constantly in flux. They're not comfortable with that. They're comfortable with the rock solid foundation, right? Like they want the Byzantine text. They want a Byzantine priority, and they're comfortable for the most part. Like, and I pay close attention to the King James only controversy and the King James only crowd, because I think that it's interesting. It's interesting, the dialogue between the two sides. And what I tend to find is that, and please mention in the chat if you don't agree with this, but there are people who are open-minded, there's a school of thought that, Byzantine priority, that basically, as long as you're in the Byzantine tradition, as long as your Bible is reflecting the Byzantine text or the derivation of the Byzantine text, which is the Textus Receptus, you're good, right? Like they believe that this is authentic and this is authentic, and any minor differences between them are really, truly minor, and they're hard to find, right? Whereas once you get into these texts over here, the critical text, like the scholarly versions that are based on, look, it says Archi to Evangeliu Iisu Christou. Boom, that's it. That, like, they don't have you to Theou, the Son of God. And this is kind of like, look, textual critics have gone back and forth on this. If you look these up in the critical text, the wording Son of God in Mark 1:1 has been debated for a long time. And if I'm not mistaken, the ECM reading is actually leaning more now towards the Son of God being originally there. And this is the first verse of the Gospel of Mark. But for a while, the text critical logic was like, well, okay, if you're a scribe and you're copying the Gospel of Mark, and the Gospel of Mark opens with this phrase, like the Gospel of Jesus Christ, the beginning of the Gospel of Jesus Christ, the Son of God. What scribe in his right mind would just skip over Son of God, right? Like that at its very core, that is like a really important logical question that you need to ask. Like, why would that be deleted? So the baseline, text critical methodology here is like, well, it probably was added later, right? It's probably a clarification. Like the author didn't write that, because if he did, every single scribe, because these are all Christian scribes, so like, why would a scribe delete it? And so it's that sort of it's that axiom that undergirds the critical text removal. Like they just removed it. There's Archi to Evangeliu Iisu, and then you see a little bracket there, and that bracket means something's been removed. Now, there is a textual apparatus associated with the SBL that will tell you which manuscripts have Son of God and which manuscripts do not have the Son of God reading. We are currently rolling that out. I don't know. I don't have an official date of when I can announce confidently that that's going to be available. But again, register for free. If you can, sign up for the $5 a month plan. That gives you access to Bible study tools over here, including notes, right? Including notes, including bookmarks. including the ability to take, to go in here and create a category of bookmark called textual variant, for example, or theological word study, versification, inspiration. You can create lots and lots of color-coded bookmarks and just bookmark all your favorite verses, right? You can stylize the text a little bit. I have the sepia theme. I can change it to black. Actually, the customization is free. So if you go in and you customize your Bible reading experience, you can do that on the free version. But I really encourage people to start taking notes in your Bible, start bookmarking your Bible. Eventually, we're going to get the highlighting feature out. We're almost done with this phase of development. Within the next few weeks, you're going to be able to unlock a lot of cool things if you sign up for that $5 a month tier. We really, really need your support to this is value that we're giving to people, right? And very, very soon, and I've seen a demo of this, so like I'm actually like I've seen it. I can't show it yet. We're still working out a few bugs, but the textual apparatus that is it's going to be over here in this right hand panel, available for people who are signed up at the $5 a month tier. It's going to show you the manuscripts that have the reading versus the manuscripts that don't have the reading, right? And if you keep going, kathos diagrapte ento Isaia to profiti. So here you have as it is written in Isaiah versus os diagrapte entis prophetes, right? Like as it is written in the prophets, os diagrapte entis prophetes, as it is written in the prophets. Again, Byzantine, Textus Receptus, full agreement, right? They align almost always, right? And when you find places that they don't align, what that means is that for whatever reason, Erasmus, when he was comparing his Byzantine manuscripts, ended up favoring a reading that the later, Robinson, Pierpont, the scholars who reconstructed the majority text in this version that we have here on Cross Bible, they believed that they came to the conclusion that in those instances where there are differences, Erasmus picked a valid reading that was in his exemplars, but they believed that the sort of prototypical, like if you were to follow the Byzantine text all the way back to the source, which we don't really have, but like if you had a manuscript that was coming directly from this source, that's what they're trying to reconstruct. They're not trying to reconstruct necessarily the original or the prototype or like the Ausgangstext, right? Like they're just trying to reconstruct what would have been the prototypical Byzantine text, or scholars used to call this the Eastern text, like the predecessor of the Byzantine text. So the long story short, the answer to the question of what the difference is between the Textus Receptus and the Byzantine text, not much difference at all, right? So yeah, as the meme says, why not both? Sorry, I must be missing some context on that one. For true insight on this topic, the King James Bible Research Council. Yeah. There is a lot of information on that one. So Jesus Tales says, is it the gospel about Jesus or the gospel Jesus is bringing in Mark 1? That's really just a question of what the genitive means, right? Archi tu evangeliu Isu Christu iu tu theou. So the thing about evangelion, right, the gospel, is that this seems to be the beginning of the usage of that word to mean what we mean when we say a gospel, like the Gospel of Mark, right? Like a narrative story, a narrative biography about Jesus. Paul doesn't use that term in that way, right? Like he talks about his gospel. He's referring to, the good news of salvation of Jesus that is going out to all the nations. He's not referring to a biography, right? Or, a bios. So here, does it mean, the question, and it's a very good one, does to evangelion Isu Christu mean that it's the gospel about Jesus? That's one interpretation. It's the story of Jesus's life, right? So this is the beginning of the story of Jesus's life. Or is it the gospel that he brings? Is it the message? Is it because evangelion is good news, right? Because he's announcing something, angelo, right? So it's the good announcement. So it's the beginning of the good announcement of Jesus's resurrection from the dead, right? Like that is obviously also a sense in which this could be used here. So it seems to me like archito evangeliu in this instance is actually the beginning of this biography that I'm writing about Jesus, right? Like that is what the author of Mark is implying there. And then it's just whether or not Son of God is a parenthetical, whether or not, this is actually kind of like the title of the gospel, right? Because after that, he continues just Osia graptensis prophetas. And you can see that even the second, and that's the thing, is like these textual variants are so pervasive that you get them right in the second. Well, first of all, you get it right in the first verse, right? So the first verse of the Gospel of Mark, which is considered the foundational, first gospel, immediately opens with a textual variant. And then right there in the second verse, it's like kathos iagrapte or os iagrapte. Kathos and os are actually like, they mean as, right? Or just as, kathos. These words don't really differ. Like they don't, like there's not a drastic change in meaning between kathos and os if you read Greek, right? So whenever you're reading a translation, and like let's just like compare, for example, like if we pull up the NIV and we compare that to the King James. Sorry, and you're gonna have to yeah, okay, boom. All right, so as it is written, right? As it is written. And then we go, like, let's say, like, look at what the King James has there. The King James has as it is written, right? So as over here in the NIV, they're translating kathos most likely, right? Like the underlying text that they're translating from says kathos. The King James is translating os, and for those who don't know Greek, those are synonyms, right? They're the same word. So a lot of the times when you are looking at textual variants in the Greek, you're looking at like a scribe could easily see kathos and copy it as os and not really be monkeying with the text, right? Like that's not that's not a big change. Or they could say os, and for whatever stylistic reason, they could prefer to write kathos. But the author would have originally written one of those, right? Like one of them must be original, or one of them must be older than the other one. Maybe the original said something completely different, and all we have is two different versions of another, or like the genealogy could be constructed in a number of different ways. Good news of God 15 saying the time is fulfilled and the kingdom of God has come near. Repent and believe in the good news. Yeah. So according to Wasserman, eu to theou was present in the earliest reading of Mark 1:1. Yes. So that's the thing, is like when you're looking at the critical text, if you're looking at the SBL, the Society of Biblical Literature's version of that, you can see that they've dropped it off, right? So like that's this text right here. But that is if I recall, the Editio Critica Maior is going to have that in there. So basically, it's kind of like whack-a-mole, like this the Son of God textual variant in Mark 1:1. It's like it's there, it's not. It's there, it's not. It seems like based on the future of textual criticism, it's coming back, right? It's coming back. It's going to be there. It's going to be in all the future Bibles. So again, what's the point of why do we need a new Bible? Well, we need to kind of like nail this stuff down, right? And I get there is a valid perspective of like, okay, if you're just anchored in the Textus Receptus, if you're like a King James onlyist, the benefit of being a King James onlyist, or being somebody who has this position of Byzantine priority, is you kind of get to stake your whole worldview, or your view of the text, on the idea that like it's been pretty stable for a really long time, and the version that I have just doesn't change, right? Like if you're a Byzantine priority, then your version of the Bible is like it's solid, right? Like the critical text can update itself until kingdom come. Like it can get updated 50 times in the next 50 years, and your Bible is never going to change, right? That gives people a lot of comfort in sort of knowing that, like, whatever they do over there in the critical text world and academia and scholarship, I got my Bible right here, and it ain't going nowhere, right? Whereas if you are relying on this is a work in progress, right? Like this isn't the final form of the text. that's the final form of that text. This is not the final form of this text. It's subject to revision. It's subject to additional discoveries. It's subject to additional, later scholarship. If they, tweak their computer program to make calculations a little differently, if they use AI, that Bible is going to be updated, and it's going to continue to be updated. And then the English translations that are based on it are going to be updated, and international translations are going to be created from the newer versions of that. And some people just don't like this sort of this moving target, right? It makes some people uncomfortable. And so to make people even more uncomfortable, let's go back to this list, right? And again, if you want to access this list from the beginning, just go to crossbible.com, go to the blog, right? The blog post, scroll down. Well, first of all, watch all of our stuff, please. But if you want to jump to this Codex Sinaiticus, the link to this video is in the description, by the way. You can watch this video, and this is going to give you the list where I have actually curated the comparison for you, so that you can click here on Matthew 17:21, Matthew 18:23. So we got 3 verses omitted from the Gospel of Matthew. We have a bunch of verses, 2, 4, 5 verses omitted from the Gospel of Mark, 1 omitted from Luke, 1 omitted from John, 4 omitted from Acts, and then 1 in Romans and 1 in 1 John. So you have short explanations here for why that is. And we're going to start with Matthew 17:21, which you can click, and it's going to default to a comparison of 4 Bible versions side by side that are going to compare the King James 1769 edition with the Stephanus New Testament. So these two are going to be in lockstep, right? These are consistent with each other. And then, sorry, this shifted a little bit. There. And then you're going to see the New American Standard versus the SBL. Now, I personally have made a bookmark on this verse, so you can see that all you need to do is click here, and you can bookmark the verse, and you can select. I've bookmarked it with my category textual variant. You can create your own categories, and you can bookmark the verses on your own. Again, $5 a month, right? That's how you can support us to make this feature even more powerful. So this is my bookmark for textual variant, and then I have a note here, so I can open up my note. So in Matthew 17:21, why is this omitted, right? And again, let's just sort of like hide this for a second and take stock in where we are at. So in the King James, it says, howbeit this kind of demon, right, goeth not out, but by prayer and fasting, right? So tuto de to llenos, ukek porrevete imi en prosevhi kenistia, right? So for prayer and fasting. So the New American Standard Bible skips over this, right? So here you start with verse 20, and he said to them, because of your meager faith, for truly I say to you, if you have faith the size of a mustard seed, you will say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move, and nothing will be impossible for you. And then all of a sudden, in the Byzantine tradition, he says like this kind of demon can't come out except with prayer and fasting. And while they were gathering together in Galilee, Jesus said to them, the Son of Man is going to be handed over to men. So from the Byzantine tradition, right, if that's your perspective, if you are taking the position that verse 21 needs to be there because it's like it was there in the Byzantine tradition, you have to read this as Jesus talking about, giving them the mustard seed analogy, saying if you have faith, you can move mountains. And then it shifts to howbeit this kind goeth not out, but by prayer and fasting. And then the Son of Man shall be betrayed in the hands of men. There's a reason why this is sort of considered to be a little bit awkward, right? Like why, like what verse 21 is you have to admit that even if you are of the impression that this was originally there and in that position, it's a hard pill to swallow, right? The earliest and best witnesses, which includes Codex Sinaiticus, Codex Vaticanus, don't have this verse. They don't have verse 21 in this position, right? And again, this is just a note that I took. This is not like a permanent feature of Cross Bible. I'm trying to distill all of this scholarship for this live stream. You can take your own notes in here and say whatever you want. So if I come in here, I can actually edit this text. I can embed hyperlinks. I can style it. This is all the custom Bible study feature that you can get for $5 a month. I'm just showing you what I have in my own little toolbox in my version of Cross Bible, because I'm also, a user and I'm testing this out. So there are some kinks, but if you sign up for $5 a month and you incorporate Cross Bible into your Bible study process and you're taking notes and you're bookmarking, please get on the Discord. Links in the description. I'll drop it in the description. I don't think the Discord link's in the description yet. I'll pin a comment actually with the updated Discord link. Start taking notes in your own Bible, please, and give us feedback on Discord, especially if you're having any trouble, if you encounter any bugs. We currently have a lot of great people on Discord who are sharing their Bible study experience with us and providing us feedback to help us fix bugs. So this is considered to be an assimilation from Mark 9:29, right? A scribal harmonization. And the earliest traditions in Syriac and Coptic omit this verse, right? And it's remarkable given their monastic fasting culture, right? The original was, this kind can only come out through prayer. And the later gloss was, and fasting, kenistia, right? So according to Metzger, copyists often insert readings from parallels, and there's no reason to omit it if it's authentic, right? Like if the original text said, how can this come out through any means than by prayer and fasting, it's assumed that a later scribe would simply copy it. They wouldn't delete it, right? And the pericope already concludes at verse 20 with this, nothing is impossible with faith, right? Verse 21 is a duplicate ending, right? And if you in here, this is a hyperlink, right? It's not colored, but if we look at Mark 9, here's where that's coming from, right? And he said unto them, this kind can come forth by nothing but prayer and fasting. So this presumably is the source, and basically whoever is copying Matthew is pulling it from Mark, according to the scholarship, right? So you can contest it, but this is just my presentation of why it's missing, quote unquote, from the critical text. If you don't think it's, quote unquote, missing from the critical text, then you think that it was basically removed from the critical text and it should be original. And that's not a debate. I'm not getting into that. So why would it be added, right? Well, in the early church, there was a rising emphasis on asceticism and fasting, right? Monastic scribes especially were inclined to insert such references, right? Other examples of these inclusions include Acts 10:30, 1 Corinthians 7:5, Romans 14:17. So in conclusion, Matthew 17:21 reflects later scribal piety, not the original text. And in modern Bibles, it's omitted from the main text and it's often placed in a footnote. So this is our first taste of what we're gonna be reviewing today of these omissions, right? And that one is like, okay, it's not that, it's fairly innocuous, right? Like the fact that it's omitted. There are some people who will probably be extremely offended by the omission of any verse, right? But we have it there in Mark. And let's see, it could be confusing in that sense, because if that reading is retained, it kind of diminishes Jesus is saying on faith being something powerful, right? I could see how that is. And so if we move on to the next one, it's Matthew 18:11. It parallels Luke 19:10, right? So get pulled up. This is going to jump us into this verse. So the thing about these hyperlinks, the way that Cross Bible is building these hyperlinks, is that the arrangement of the text that you construct, like the versions you choose to see them all in parallel, this is actually in the URL string. So you can see that this is Cross Bible. This is in the URLs. It's the KJV 1769, the Textus Receptus 1550, the NASB, the SBL, Matthew 18:11. If you wanted to share this exact link with somebody on social media or via email, all you need to do is click here on verse 11. You can pin it. Right now it's pinned. It's the primary verse. You can bookmark it, and you can copy displayed versions of the displayed versions of this verse with your with the link to your clipboard. If I click on this, it's copied to my clipboard, and then I can go in and I can paste it somewhere and share it on social media so that whoever then clicks on the link that it creates, it's going to share these exact versions. And if they click on that link, they're going to come into Cross Bible and they're going to see exactly what you see. So you can actually illustrate a point if you want to make a point using a Greek and an English in parallel, or two different English translations, or four versions in parallel. 4 is the max, because after beyond 4, it just becomes really hard to read. So we've capped it at 4. This social media sharing feature is very, very powerful. So I use it all the time. If you see me posting like on a Bible study Facebook group, I'm usually posting using that feature. I am French, brother. Bonjour, bonjour. Welcome to French. And I have Louis II, like a really old Louis II French Bible. I have to apologize. I don't have a lot of modern French versions. We're working on it. So thank you to all of my French speaking friends. So far, it's very English and Greek dominant right now, but we're working on getting foreign language versions. So you can see the King James here has, "For the Son of Man is come to save that which was lost." A theologically sound verse. Like, why would it be taken out, right? Il thegar oios tu anthropos sose to apololos, right? So that which was lost. So here we're skipping over this in the NASB. And in the NASB, it jumps from 10 to 12. "See that you do not look down on one of these little ones, for I say to you that their angels in heaven continually see the face of my Father who is in heaven. What do you think? If any man has 100 sheep and one of them goes astray, he will not leave the 99 on the mountains and go and search for the one that is lost." So for the Son of Man has come to save that which was lost. This flows like verse 11 seems like it has, there's a good reason for including it there, right? Like whoever, if a scribe inserted it, it's a pretty natural insertion. If we take a look, so for the Son of Man has come to save that which was lost. Why would it be omitted? Well, it's absent from the Alexandrian, Egyptian, Antiochian texts. This is from Metzger. So we're gonna see a lot of this terminology, right, with regards to the text types. It's present only in secondary later manuscripts. So, for example, the D Codex Washington, Codex Beze, Codex Washingtonianus. That's what D and W represent. Later Byzantine, often by later hands. Two competing forms, one verbatim from Luke 19:10, another abbreviated, a sign of interpolation. Verse 10 speaks of not despising little ones. Verse 12 begins the parable of the lost sheep. So verse 11 acts as a bridge, a scribal attempt to smooth the transition, right? And that Metzger affirms that it is clearly a borrowing from Luke 19:10. So whoever is copying Matthew is very familiar with Luke 19. And according to Allende, the omission has much stronger evidence. It's a mission statement, which echoes elsewhere in Matthew 9:13 and Luke 5:32. And if we take a look at Luke 19:10, we can see, let's get Luke 19:10 loaded up. Boom, boom. It's going to jump you into verse 10. And you can see, taking a long time to load this one. It takes longer to load 4 versions. That's why. But I was prepared for the wait time here. So for the Son of Man is come to seek and to save that which was lost. So again, il thegaros tu anthropos itise kisose to apololos. So same wording exactly, right? So either it's a parallel where the Gospel of Luke is in lockstep with Matthew, or it's a harmonization where the copyist of the Gospel of Matthew wants to bring in Luke and harmonize them, make them match. So why would it be added? Well, the copyist wanted to insert a strong mission statement here, borrowing from Luke 19:10, where it fits contextually. shows an early scribal habit of improving narrative flow, which with familiar sayings, not original to Matthew, best explained as a pious borrowing from Luke, and modern Bibles omit it, usually footnote the variant. So the tricky thing here is that the textual critics are acknowledging that this fits really well. Like Matthew 18:11 is it's sort of a hand in glove fit. And that's why they can't wrap their heads around the idea that some of these like really old witnesses, right? Like the D text, Codex Bezae, Codex Washingtonianus, those are in the timeline of the Bible. So let's look at what those are. So that's, sorry, making everybody dizzy. Codex Bezae, the D text, is over here in the Western text, and it's a 5th century manuscript that is really remarkable. And it's funny because a lot of people tend to poo-poo it in scholarship as being like a completely aberrant text that's like very, very different. It has lots of text. It's chock full of textual variants. But whenever it represents something, people take it seriously. Like in this case, it's being taken seriously, even though in a lot of cases it's not taken seriously. So we have Codex Bezae over here in the 5th century, and then the W text. And again, you could just easily come in here and you could search for W. It's just you're going to get all the W's, but Washingtonianus is what it is. So W 032. So Washingtonianus is also sporting the omission of that verse, right? And that is somewhere between the 4th and 5th century. So we got 4th, 5th century manuscripts showing that this verse is missing, or it's not there. The assumption is that if you get back to the earliest version of Matthew 18:11, it's just not that verse 11 is not going to be there. And because it's very, very easy to explain why scribes would just put it in, and hard to explain why scribes would just take it out for no apparent reason when it fits so well. The scholarship is leaning towards the idea that it was just inserted because it's a nice fit. It just makes sense. It's harmonizing with Luke. There are lots of explanations as to why it would be put in, and it's kind of hard to explain why it would be taken out. That's the general gist of it. The history of the Textus Receptus King James Bible Research Council. Yes, please. I should probably do some content reviewing that as well. So the next textual variant we're going to go over is Matthew. The last one in Matthew is 23:14. Let's take a look at what that says. And again, I am loading pages that have 4 versions, and I'm jumping to the verse. And so you have to bear with me. It's a little slow, but it's worth it because we're getting basically the Byzantine tradition on the left and the modern text critical tradition, which is basically like the older Alexandrian tradition in some cases, on the right. So you basically, it depends. You could say it's old school versus new school, or you could say it's like old school versus older school, depending on your perspective, right? So the text here says, "Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for ye devour widows' houses, and for a pretense make long prayer. Therefore ye shall receive the greater damnation." And this is coming after the exact same phrase, right? Or more or less. So woe. So reading from the New American Standard, "But woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, because you shut the kingdom of heaven in front of people, for you do not enter it yourselves, nor do you allow those who are entering to go in." So it goes from there to another instance in verse 15. "Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, because you travel around on sea and land to make one proselyte, and when he becomes one, you make him twice as much a son of hell as yourselves," which verse 15 is in there. Now, another thing I want to mention here is that we are working on an improvement to the cross Bible user interface that will basically, and this is already done. Well, my developer has demoed this. I know it's done. It just hasn't been released for prime time just yet, but it's in the pipeline. And I'm hoping this is going to be one of my last, if not my last, live streams that I'm going to do where I'm going to show this, where I'm going to show you guys that basically verse 13 is in alignment. Verse 14 is in alignment when it's there, right? These two are aligned. But now we got verse 14 on the same line as verse 15. This may not bother people too much. I'm hoping it doesn't, but it really bothers me. It really bothers me because I want to see verse 15 always aligned with verse 15, even when verse 14 is absent. And the way that we have accomplished this, and it's just not released to the public yet, but it's going to be in the next release, is to, even when you're looking, if you're looking at the New American Standard and you're comparing the New American Standard, a modern, Bible that's based on the critical text, to the King James or New King James or some other version that has the verse, there needs to be a gap. So you need to be able to see verse 14 on the left over here, and then you need to see a blank space so that verse 15 can be realigned with verse 15, and then 16 with 16, 17 to 17. There are some people who have pointed this out to me, who reached out and said, your verses are out of alignment. And I can tell you they're out of alignment in 16 places. They're out of alignment in Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. They're out of alignment in the 16 places where there are omissions. We are aware of it. We have fixed it. It will be released to the public soon, so that basically our goal is to align these verses programmatically, like through our code in our user interface, so that no matter what Bible we add to our collection, it will always keep the verses in alignment so that you're comparing apples to apples. That's one of the foundational missions of Cross Bible, because in any other version where you're just using like another Bible website, or you're using Bible software and you're aligning verses, a lot of the times the user interface is showing paragraphs. So whenever one skips a verse, it doesn't put everything out of whack, right? Like the people who design those sites, they're not really too concerned about aligning verses when one goes missing, right? Like they just, if you look up Matthew 23:14 in a modern Bible, on a modern Bible website, a lot of the times it'll just give you an error message. It'll just say like, we don't have that information is not there, right? It just, that verse doesn't exist. We don't want to do that. We want to make sure that you always are able to access the text even when it's missing. You can see that gap. If you're just reading the New American Standard, or one of your favorite Bibles that's a modern edition that doesn't have that verse, there's no reason to open up a gap unless you're comparing. So the next version of Cross Bible that we roll out and make public, after we do some testing and iron out some kinks, will actually have a gap at verse 14 on this right-hand column. What you're looking at now is like, doesn't make sense, right? You got 14 and 14 compared against 15. 15 needs to be bumped down. So I'm actually, I intended on revealing this today to show you guys this is the end of this. Really, this is a bug. This is it's a feature. We always knew that we were going to fix this. It just took us a long time to do it, and now we're almost ready to unveil it. So this is very jarring, basically, that 14 is not quite aligned with 15, and that is that variant. So if you think it's original, you have a good standing, because it's found in the majority of manuscripts. It's just absent from the Alexandrian witnesses. Now, moving on to the Gospel of Mark, Mark 17:16. That would be great if everything aligns to be able to compare verses. Thank you, Stephen. Yeah, that's the thing. That's the point, is that we really need to make sure that if we are giving people the ability to hold Bibles up side by side, we need to account for the fact that like verses are missing, right? We need a textual apparatus so that when you see that something is missing, especially if it's, because this is the thing, these 16 omissions, these 16 textual variants, they're the most visible because they skip verse numbers, right? A lot of the times when something is omitted, if it's omitted inside a verse, if it's just one word that's missing or added, or it's a couple words, it's a phrase, you're not going to notice, right? Because the verse number doesn't change. These are just the 16 that are the most prominent. And it's what, if you're kind of like, if you're on the King James Bible or Byzantine priority side, you're going to be like, my Bible has all the numbers are present. Like, you take an inventory, everybody's present here. All the numbers are present. These are just the 16 labeled verses that happen to just not be there in the critical text. So here in Mark 7, if you look at, okay, so like let's go from the King James from 15 to 17, right? There is nothing from without a man that entering into him can defile him, but the things which come out of him, those that defile, those are they that defile the man. If any man have ears to hear, let him hear. And when he has entered into the house from the people, his disciples asked him concerning the parable. Now, this is kind of innocuous, right? Like this textual variant. I've labeled it again. I got a little bookmark here for the textual variant, and that, sorry, it throws off the order. So I have a label here. I've bookmarked it as a textual variant. You can do that by, again, you click on the verse number and then grab a bookmark and give it a category and drop it in there. And you can also take a note. So I have a note here, and we're going to review the note that if anyone has ears to hear, let him hear. Now, that's something you can kind of interject in a lot of places, right? Like that doesn't really in and of itself mean that it's not reliable, but it's absent from earliest witnesses. And we have the sort of usual suspects, right? We have Sinaiticus, Vaticanus, L, and A. What is L? Drop it in the chat if anybody knows, because that's one. Hold on a second. Again, if you go to the timeline, you can look some of these abbreviations up. And A is Alexandrinus, but it's an asterisk, which means that it's probably a marginal note, or it's a correction, right, in the manuscript. It's found in later majority tradition, but likely a secondary gloss. The placement feels like a stock saying added to round out Jesus's teaching, right? So again, it's this whole if any man has ears to hear, let him hear. If it is original, it's not clear why it would be removed. Whereas if it were not there, it is pretty clear why somebody would insert it, right, as a stock saying. And it's inserted either from Mark 4:9 or 4:23, because this is just a typical saying of Jesus that seems to fit here, right? It's an easy to see why copyists would add the refrain in a fitting spot, right? So it's easy to explain the insertion, hard to explain the deletion. The formulaic phrase, he who has ears to hear, let him hear, itisehi ota kui nakueto, right? It's like, it sounds a lot better in Greek, by the way. Scribes often duplicated familiar sayings where they seemed appropriate. Here, it's tacked onto Jesus' statement in verse 15 as a natural seeming conclusion. So the original Mark ended at verse 15, and verse 16 is a later scribal addition, scribal gloss. Modern Bibles omit it from the main text. Sometimes they put it in a footnote. Again, it's been omitted not because the textual critics have determined that like it doesn't fit, or it's not like it's like it sounds bad or something like that. They didn't omit it because they don't like it. They omitted it because, again, we got these early texts, right? And let's test my my theory here. So we have these early texts. We get codex. Let's see. Does anybody in the chat know what L stands for? Codex. Let's see. L. So we have early. So we have Codex Sinaiticus and Codex Vaticanus. Like, you might not believe that these are reliable manuscripts, Codex Alexandrinus, but when these three agree that a verse is missing, it's the critical text is going to tend to omit it. Whereas even if it's in every single copy of the Bible after that, all the way over here, right? If like it's in every single copy, it's the critical text is generally going to favor if there's no way to explain why it would be omitted if it were original, but there's a really good explanation of why it would be added, because it's just something that, like because it fits. So the fact that it fits, the fact that it sounds good and natural in that place, but is omitted in earlier manuscripts is precisely what leads textual critics to conclude it's probably not original, right? I'm not making that as a personal declaration that I believe it's not original. I'm just saying that's their logic. Like that's why it's not there. So again, it's not because it's like they read it and they're like, oh, I really don't like that. I really don't like that verse. Let's take it out. No. It's like, it's understandable why somebody would insert it, right? That verse was probably added because anyone who has ears to hear ought to hear is a somewhat common conclusion to Jesus's sayings, right? Like you can see why it would be added. You can't really understand, it's really hard to explain why somebody would just remove that. So that is so Mark 7:16. Now let's look at Mark 9:44 and see if we can get a more interesting, these are harmonizations repeating verse 48. So we got 44 and 46 are really the same breed of textual variant, right? So 44, 46, let's go ahead and go in the King James from 43 all the way to 47, right? Let's do a little a broader scope of this so we can really get a sense of what's going on here. And because this verse, Mark 9 in the current version of Cross Bible, is really out of whack because of this omitted verse, right? So we have, and if thy hand offend thee, cut it off. It is better for thee to enter into life maimed than having two hands to go into hell, into the fire that never shall be quenched, where their worm dieth not, and the fire is not quenched, right? So that's the verse in question. It's not in the critical text. It is not in modern translations. And if thy foot offend thee, cut it off. It is better for thee to enter halt into life than having 2 feet to be cast into hell, into the fire that never shall be quenched, where the worm dieth not and the fire is not quenched. So that's another one. See again, 46, 46, 48. So we're already 2 verses out of alignment now. And if thine eye offend thee, pluck it out. It is better for thee to enter into the kingdom of God with one eye. With one eye than having 2 eyes to be cast into hellfire, where the worm dieth not and the fire is not quenched, right? So here we get 48. Oh, I'm sorry. Did I skip? Okay. And then we get 49 and 50. So here it looks like, okay, 49 and 50 in this tradition, they're over. So we got 50 here, 49. So 49 and 50 are there. They're represented, but they're way out of alignment because we've now gotten 2 verses. We have 2 omitted verses in Mark chapter 9, right? And what does our note say about that? Well, if you look, the omission. So the text of the King James version and the Textus Receptus has repeated in verse 44 and 46, where the worm dieth not and the fire is not quenched, right? Where the worm dieth not and the fire is not quenched. Why is it omitted in the critical text? Well, it's absent in the earliest witnesses, Sinaiticus, Vaticanus, sorry, I blank on these ones, and Washingtonianus, Syriac, and Coptic. So both verses are duplications of verse 48, right? So in other words, we have in all traditions, we have verse 48, where the worm does not die and the fire is not extinguished. So in the traditional Byzantine textual tradition, which ended up in the King James Bible, in the Textus Receptus, you basically have Jesus repeating himself 3 times, right? He's saying where the worm does not die and the fire is not extinguished. He says it over and over and over again. Opus skolik softon utelefta ketopir uzvinete, right? So either Jesus is just repeating himself 3 times, or a scribe copying an earlier manuscript ended up putting that in there once, putting it in there twice, where it really should have only been in verse 48. There's stronger support for omission than inclusion. In other words, the early versions don't have it. It's kind of understandable why a scribe would have Jesus repeating himself over and over again. Whereas if Jesus were repeating himself in that, if you were really punctuating that over and over again with the same saying, the scribe would probably just copy it 3 times, right? Logically. So it just makes more sense to take out those two verses that are not supported by the early witnesses. Metzger and Allende agree that it's just a recapitulation of verse 48 as a refrain at 44 and 46, probably influenced by the repeated phrase into Gehenna, right? And so these are common in oral recitation and liturgical readings. So in other words, if somebody's reading in the church, maybe somebody created a lectionary version in the Byzantine Empire where they were reading it in church and it sounded nice to just keep repeating it over and over again, right? Opus colix afton utelefta ketopirus vinete. And it's maybe at some point it was just considered a liturgical reading. It's like this is the way we say it in our church out loud, and it ended up in the actual official Bible that got passed down, right? Like that ended up in the manuscripts that Erasmus was copying from, and Erasmus was just like, well, it's there 3 times, I'm just going to put it 3 times, right? So the conclusion of modern scholars is that the copyist smoothed the structure by repeating the powerful line in verse 44, 46, and 48 3 times, and 3 is a special number, right? So it's like a chorus. Whereas some manuscripts even show uneven inclusion, right? One verse is added, the other's not. So not only are we missing these two, 44 and 46 in very early manuscripts, they're inconsistently added. Some of them only have 46 or 44, right? So something's going on here. It's just the New American Standard SBL, they just took it out, right? It's just gone. So there we have the omission of 44 and 46. Then we have Mark 11:26, and we're just going to investigate all of these just to be thorough, right? Like the Holy Trinity, right? Like the Holy Trinity, and we're going to get to one of those famous examples too. So here in the Mark 11:26, so we have an example here where the SBL has skipped, right? It is skipped from verse 25 to verse 27, but the NASB, the editors decided to bracket this one. They didn't drop it, right? The SBL text dropped it, but again, it's a question of, well, why would a translator rely on like a more simplified, like the UBS5, right? Like, because they want to see maybe the translator, even if, like, let me see the UBS5, this is Mark 11:26. So just out of curiosity, I'm just going to double check. So 11:26 in the UBS5 edition is omitted. It's gone. It's not there, right? This is the Bible that translators tend to use. So the Committee of the New American Standard Bible, in seeing that there was a gap from 25 to 27, just like you see here in the SBL, they look down in the apparatus. They see omit verse 26 has the letter A. It has an A rating, which means that the committee of the critical text, the Nestle Lawn and the UBS committee, they concluded unanimously that verse 25 is a later addition that shouldn't be there, and they took it out of the Greek. The New American Standard Bible put it back in. So they put it back in brackets to indicate, well, we don't think it's original, or it's in question whether or not it's original, but we're gonna play it safe, right? We're gonna actually put it in there. So that is why these critical editions are still helpful for translators, even if it's not just that they're just gonna like adhere to the Greek text. Here they didn't. They broke. They broke way because verse 26 is traditionally there, right? So we have, and whenever you stand praying, forgive if you have anything against anyone, so that your Father who is in heaven will also forgive you for your offenses. But if you do not forgive, neither will your Father who is in heaven forgive your offenses. Pretty profound, right? And they came again to Jerusalem, and he was walking in the temple area. The chief priests, the scribes, the elders came to him. So the NASB is favoring this. Sorry, every time I open up this panel, it pushes my highlighted verse down. So I come here, and we take a look at my notes. And again, these are my personal notes. If you go into Cross Bible and you sign up for the $5 a month plan, you will not get access to these notes. These are my, this is my scratch pad, right? I can go in here and I can tweak this. I invite all of you who are watching, and please, like, even if you just try it out, just do it for a month. Do me a favor. Sign up for the $5 a month plan for 1 month and just start dropping your notes into your Bibles. If it becomes an issue, like then next month comes around and you can't afford the $5, just pause your subscription, right, and renew later, right? Just drop some notes there that you can come back to later. Again, it's just about, like, obviously we really appreciate your support. If you can afford it, if you can't afford it, register for free. At least register for free so you can customize your reading experience and access some of the formatting features, right, to make your text look nicer. But it really helps not only to support us and support our mission and keep the lights on. It helps us sort of just validate the fact that these features are valuable to people, right? Because so far, we really do appreciate the people who have signed up and who are using it and who are giving us feedback on Discord. But if you're not going to use if you don't use the feature, you don't have the feedback to give, right? Because you're not able to pinpoint the things that need to be improved. And in the next week or so, we're rolling out a new version, and I'll make an announcement about this, with much more powerful features, including highlighting. So highlighting, bookmarking, and note taking, that's your responsibility as a student of the Bible, right? Like you need to be engaged in interacting with the text, and we would be honored to have you guys doing that on our platform. Everything is safe and secure on our database, and we really want you to be customizing your own Bible study experience. So this is the last plug I'll make for that. Please sign up for the $5 a month plan. You can always pause it and resume it later on, but at least that'll kind of give us an indication that you find this valuable, that you find the work we're doing valuable. So the omission of Mark 11:26 in the King James version, in the Textus Receptus, it has this line: but if ye do not forgive, neither will your Father which is in heaven forgive your trespasses. Right? Why does the critical text omit this? Well, it's absent from the earliest witnesses, again, across all text types: Alexandrian, Western, and Byzantine. So even Byzantine manuscripts have omissions here. It's possible accidental omission, similar endings, right? So here, let's see. Let's hide this drawer. So similar endings, what are they referring to? Well, we have homoteliuton. This is a good example of homoteliuton. So imagine that you are copying, like in the tradition, the Textus Receptus, the Byzantine tradition. If you're copying these manuscripts, you have at the end here, kiotan stikite prosefchomeni afiete iti echete katatinos ina keopatirimon o entisoranis afiimin ta paraptomata imon. So your trespasses, your sins, right? Ta paraptomata imon. Well, the next line has the exact same ending, right? Ide te imis afiete udeopatirimon o entisuranis afisi ta paraptomata. So whenever you have one line ending in ta paraptomata, and the next line also ends in ta paraptomata, what the textual critics are describing is an instance where the copyist is copying from this manuscript over here, and maybe he's looking over here and he's writing and he's checking, right? And he gets to the end of the line and it says ta paraptomata, right? And again, we're looking, this is like nicely formatted readable text. He's probably looking at like a majuscule manuscript with like all capital letters, no spaces. It's like this little tiny column. Like he doesn't have a magnifying glass. He's squinting. He's been doing this for hours, and he sees ta paraptomata imon. He's copying. He gets to the next line where that verse isn't there, and he repeats it, right? Like it's that's what they're describing here when it says similar ending, right? So let's see. widespread. So evidence points to a secondary insertion, possible accidental omission, so similar ending. So okay, sorry. So when he's copying, he thinks when he sees taparaptomataimon at the end of the line, and he's already moved on to the next verse, because when he went back to check taparaptomataimon, he wasn't, like, his eyes skipped a little bit and he thought he was on this line, but he was really on this line. That's the phenomenon of homoteleuton, right? Like the same ending is what it means. And so we can kind of see that this could be an accidental omission, which is like this is basically, even though the scholars are confident that it shouldn't be there in the critical text, they're open to the idea that it's a possible accidental omission, right? So they think it's likely inserted by scribes in imitation of Matthew 6:15. Typical case of parallel influence, where it's Mark's gospel conformed to Matthew's, right? Because they're copying Mark, but they're influenced by Matthew. They know Matthew's text, right? In 6:15. And just to, let's see, don't have a hyperlink there. Why would it be added? Well, it directly parallels Matthew 6:15. If you do not forgive, neither will your Father forgive, right? Like, so it's not like it's absent. That's there. That is, Jesus said that in Matthew. Scribes felt the teaching on forgiveness in Mark 11:25 would be incompatible without that warning, right? They needed that warning from Matthew to be imported into Mark. So an example of harmonization, right? Mark adapted to match Matthew's fuller reading. So in conclusion, not part of Mark's original gospel, secondary borrowing from Matthew for doctrinal balance. Modern Bibles omit the text. And footnote variant, however, that's not true with respect to the New American Standard Version, right? The New American Standard Version went ahead and included it. They went ahead and included it, and they bracketed it, and they kept the alignment between these three versions, and they're sort of deferring, they're bracketing it. They're disclosing that, okay, well, it's doubtful that it's original, but because of homoteleuton, because of the two endings, there is a case to be made for the idea that the scribe was originally copying a Greek version that had both of these verses in there. And that after he copied afi imin taparaptomata imon in his copy and looked back and he started the next verse. He started at 27. Because when you're going cross-eyed, making a copy for hours and hours, I mean, you're already 11 chapters into Mark. It's very understandable why you would just start with "Que ergo de Palinis Jerusalem," right? Like you're starting 27. Oops, you just missed 26. So even though, yes, earliest witnesses omit it, the critical text assumes that that's probably what the original was. We have some good reason to hypothesize why it would have been added. They also say, it's possible that the scribe could have just accidentally skipped this. It could be original. We don't know. They gave it an A rating. So there's the consensus. The A rating doesn't mean like necessarily that it's certain that it's not original, but they had a high level of constant, like they had a good reason basically to omit that, right? Let's see. Do you guys see my screen? Oh, wait. I don't think, hold on a second. Have you guys been following along my screen? Because what I'm seeing isn't, hold on a second. I'm going to remove, add to stage. Why is it? This was concerning. Have you guys been seeing my screen? Have you guys been following along? Yeah, it may have originally belonged to that verse. I'm going to stop sharing. Hold on, I'm going to remove, stop share. I'm going to try to fix this. Screen's there. No, what, you didn't know, you weren't following along? Matthew 23. Okay. So the whole time I've been talking, you guys saw Matthew 23. That's unfortunate. I thought I was showing you guys. Okay, so now you see Mark 15. Share a different tab. I was sharing this tab, but I think, okay. Sorry, I ended up with two browsers open. Matthew 23. So that's what you guys have been seeing. So you guys missed all of the Mark examples. That's frustrating. Yeah, I'm already on Mark 15. So I've been reading about it. Okay, now you see Mark. All right. Well, geez. I hope you got a lot out of what I was explaining, but you didn't get a lot of what I was actually showing on screen. So that's unfortunate. Yeah, multiple browsers. Okay, well, let's continue. Let's look at Mark 15. And sorry about that technical glitch, technical difficulty. Here we have verse 28 that was dropped. Let's look at the King James. And with him they crucified two thieves, the one on his right hand and the other on his left. And the scripture was fulfilled, which saith, and he was numbered with the transgressors. And they that passed by railing on him, wagging their heads and saying, O thou that destroyest the temple and buildest it in 3 days. So this fulfillment of scripture is not there in the critical text. Okay, so I'm going to open up my note, scroll back down to it. So for 28. All right. So, and the scripture was fulfilled, which saith, and he was numbered with the transgressors. Why omit that? Well, it's absent from the earliest Alexandrian and Western witnesses. Now, again, I have to mention that the idea that there are Alexandrian and Western witnesses and that we can assign them into these neat categories, right? Actually, I was looking at the CBGM of the missing verses during your segment on Mark. Yeah. Okay, good. So I hope you were following along in your own Bible. I hope you were following along on Cross Bible to what I was describing, even though I didn't have it on screen for a while. So I have to mention that I've received, some criticism. And especially in the Facebook group, the New Testament Textual Criticism Facebook group, whenever I shared useful charts, there were useful charts, produced a video demo of my timeline of the Bible. And when it was shared in the Textual Criticism group, a lot of people there are very adamant that basically text types are not a thing, right? So they say there are no such thing as text types. Why are you making a timeline that teaches text types? Well, unfortunately, all of the text critical resources that we have right now, Metzger's book, the books that I'm referencing, they all are talking in this language, right? They're saying, that this is absent in the earliest Alexandrian and Western witnesses. So if you don't learn the terminology of modern textual criticism, if you're just okay, well, that's out with the old, in with the new, we don't care about, textual criticism anymore. We don't care about these categories, or we don't care about the traditional form of textual criticism because we're super progressive and we want to follow the coherence-based genealogical method, religiously. Well, you're not going to understand what the Alexandrian and Western witnesses mean, right? You're not going to know that these are the witnesses. This is the group of witnesses that they're referring to. So because I don't have the ability to represent the stemmata of the coherence-based genealogical method on Cross Bible, because I don't have access to their computer system, I'm not porting their data, I'm using my own graphical representation. I believe it is actually important to preserve the early text critical tradition that all of our, most of our fairly recent scholarship is based on, right? So my recommendation is learn the traditional categorization, learn what is categorized traditionally as Alexandrian and Western, maybe even Caesarean, even though that's been in question for a long time. It's not about teaching, it's not about the CBGM, right? My timeline isn't on of the CBGM, right? Peter Gurry has an interesting video on text types in the IGNTP channel, and somebody tagged Peter Gurry on that video from Useful Charts to say, hey, look, they're teaching the traditional text type, and he posted an emoji of I don't know, someone going like this or something. He was kind of joking. He didn't say anything bad. He wasn't mean, but I know for a fact that when Peter Gurry sees that, or if I haven't. Maybe I'll have a talk with him at the SBL conference if he comes over to the booth, and we can. I hope I can have a productive conversation with him. Again, it's about teaching what is at the foundation of this Bible. The foundation of this Bible is modern textual criticism that used traditional text type categories, right? This is the language in which the scholars are describing things. It's absent from the earliest Alexandrian and Western witnesses. Now, if future text critical material is produced that just doesn't use this terminology, and eventually Cross Bible can have a new updated timeline that is based on the coherence-based genealogical method, that would be great. That's probably the next step. But right now, we're kind of anchoring ourselves in what the foundational scholarship said about this sort of thing. So it's present only in the later Byzantine tradition, and it's entered via marginal gloss. So this whole idea of and the scripture was fulfilled. Sorry, let's look at it again. Oh, it's a little clunky. Let me get back to it. You guys see it, right? Okay, good. I'll make sure you see what I see. And the scripture was fulfilled, which said, and he was numbered with the transgressors, right? That's the verse in question. That's the one that they're referring to say, look, this Metzger says that this is copied from Luke 22:37, and it's inserted into Mark. Alon confirms that it converts Luke's prediction into Mark's fulfillment, right? So there's a really, really good reason to suspect that this was a later addition, according to the scholars. It's derived from Isaiah 53:12 via Luke's quotation in 22:37. The scribes wanted to highlight fulfillment of prophecy at the crucifixion. The marginal note migrated into the text, then copied onward in Byzantine manuscripts. It's not original to Mark. It's a later theological addition. Modern Bibles omit it from the main text, usually footnoted. So that's not a definitive statement, like they don't know for a fact that happened. This is their hypothesis for how a reading like this generally could be inserted and how they think that this one in particular was inserted, right? Sorry. Again, beta version, we're going to fix this UI issue of when you open up the notepad, it kind of pushes the verses down and I have to constantly scroll to get back up to it. Again, if you want access to this notepad yourself to create notes, I invite everybody to do that. You do have to tolerate this sort of, this happens because I have the 4 versions in parallel, by the way. So in the modern editions, it goes from they crucified him among the rebels in Mark, and then Mark goes on to saying, to describe those passing were hurling abuse at him. It's hard for the textual critics to imagine that if Mark's original had full agreement with Luke saying, and the scripture was fulfilled, which it said that he was numbered with the transgressors in a quotation of Isaiah to fulfill the prophecy. If Mark had that, you bet all of the later scribes would have been copying it, right? Like they just can't logically figure out why in the world the oldest manuscripts we have taken this out. They assume it must have been just put in. I'm not making that determination. I'm just, don't shoot the messenger. But I hope that you'll indeed have a productive conversation with him. Yeah. I hope to have a productive conversation with him too. I really respect him, and I respect everybody in that textual criticism group, even if they kind of like, even if they snub their noses and kind of like don't like the timeline. I had one person comment, "Well, you're just gonna have to make a new timeline." Okay, yeah, I will eventually have to make a new timeline, but the timeline that I would like to make that would be representative of the CBGM would really need to be data driven. It would need to be based on the underlying pre-genealogical coherence of these manuscripts, right? Like that's it can't be just a graphical representation of the stemmata. That's like in the CBGM terminology. Peter Gurry has an interesting, oh yeah, you already showed that one. So now moving on to Luke. So let's take a look at Luke. Let's take a look at this textual variant in Luke. Everybody sees that loading. Boom, boom. Right. And that's jumping to that textual variant from the blog post. Let's give it a second and it will. Oh, okay. So 2 men shall be in the field. The one shall be taken and the other left. και αποκριθέντες λέγουσιν αυτό. Well, this is in answering, he told them, πού κύριε, όδε είπεν αυτής, όπου το σώμα, εκεί συναχθήσονται οι αετοί. So the two men will be in the field and one will be taken and the other will be left. And this is a little, oh, okay. Oh, sorry. I was reading from 37. Okay. So here we have in Stephanus's Textus Receptus, we actually do have a jump here from 35 to 37. So 36, I'm sorry, I'm just discovering this in real time that verse 36 is missing from Stephanus's Textus Receptus. I have to double check that. I don't know if it I have to double check the source data to see. Let me actually change this to let me check the Elsevier Bible. Let's see what Elsevier has. Give it a second to load. Okay, so yeah, and this edition of Elsevier actually marks variants, right? So here they do align. They have verse 36 in the Elsevier Bible. Dio esode, so two man. Dio esode en to agro, ois paraliphisete, ke o heteros aphethisete. So two men will be in the field, and one will be taken and the other will be left. So this is the variant, Luke 17, and we got the note here that the two men will be in the field, one shall be taken, the other should be left. Why is this omitted from the critical text? Well, it is absent from a lot of the quote unquote earliest and best witnesses, right? We got P75, Sinaiticus, Vaticanus, Alexandrinus, Washingtonianus. It's only supported by weak and divided late witnesses, very likely borrowed from Matthew 24:40. Metzger notes that possible accidental omission, but far from likely an assimilation to Matthew, right? That's what they think is happening with Luke, right? Luke here, the synoptic problem. Elan mentions that the evidence for insertion is too weak. The verse derived from parallel tradition, right? So why would it be added by scribes? Well, it's drawn directly from Matthew 24:40. Scribes thought to harmonize Luke with Matthew's eschatological teachings. The expansion reflects a tendency to fill out parallels for consistency, and it's probably a later harmonization with Matthew. Modern Bibles omit it and add it in the footnote. That one's pretty straightforward. Let's look at John. So we got John 5, 3b through 4. So John 5, 3b through 4. Yeah, so that was the sole Lucan removed verse. Yeah, exactly. The only one that Luke took out. So here we got John 5 and John 5, 4. And this is the way that it's listed. It says 3b through 4. So basically what you have is, like in the King James, it's in these lay a great multitude of impotent folk, of blind, halt, withered, waiting for the moving of the water. Then for an angel went down at a certain season into the pool and troubled the water. Whosoever then first after the troubling of the water stepped in was made whole of whatsoever disease he had. So this is that blessing, that blessed pool, like the magical pool. In those porticos lay a multitude of those who were sick, blind, limping, halt, right? Limping, or paralyzed, right? So we have that part of verse 3 here in the King James matching, but then this waiting for the moving of the water and the homenon tin tuidatos kinisin is not there. So this omission touches the end of verse 3 and the entirety of verse 4. Angelos har katakiron katevanen. So here we have this the angel who went down at a certain time into the pool. That angel is not there in these other manuscripts, right? Like this, it jumps from 3a, skips over 3b, and jumps all the way to 5. Now a man was there who had been ill for 38 years. So I have this whole scene with the angel coming down, just gone, right? Waiting for the moving the water, for the angel went down at a certain season into the pool and troubled the water. So this is absent in earliest and best witnesses, right? We've got early papyri, P66, P75, Sinaiticus, Vaticanus, Beze, So early scribes marked it with an obelisk or with obeli or asterisk in 20 plus Greek manuscripts, recognized that it was spurious. So like they're copying it, but they're like marking it like we're doubtful that it should be there. It contains non-Johannine vocabulary, ekdecheste, right? Kinesis, tarahi, nosima, words that are not attested elsewhere in John. Wide variation in how the verse is worded across manuscripts, hallmark of secondary tradition. So if somebody inserts something kind of late, sometimes later copyists that don't have earlier manuscripts to compare it against will paraphrase it. Metzger says that the gloss is meant to explain verse 7, the troubling of the water. It's not original. The later legendary supplement inferred from the paralytic's words. And in verse 7, the man complains, I have no one to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up. So later readers ask, why is the water stirred? Copyists supplied an explanatory legend that an angel came down, stirred the water, first entrant healed. Over time, this marginal note migrated into the text, right? So verse 3b through 4, they're just not part of John's gospel. Modern Bibles omit it from the text and usually put it in a footnote as a variant. So far, we've reviewed a lot of textual variants that are very arguably like not that major, right? Like this just isn't, just a bunch of nothing burgers, right? Like things that if they were original, you can put them back, or like here we do have narrative content, right? Like we have this angel that is appearing that's just not there in other versions, right? So like this is arguably a pretty significant textual variant. Like I gotta say, like it's like a question of whether or not this angel actually like historically did this thing. This, you can imagine that from the perspective of somebody who is ideologically like aligned with the King James only movement or Byzantine priority, if you kind of give the benefit of the doubt to the Byzantine tradition and the copyists that were copying the Bibles in that tradition, you are less likely to agree that a scribe would have just inserted this whole thing like angelos kar katakeron kateven and tikoli vitra. So like that an angel would have come down and done, like it's hard to imagine that something this significant would have just been fabricated, which is what the scholars are saying, that this is an insertion. You can understand the hesitance on the part of the people who have had this in their Bible for many generations, for centuries, to just throw it out because it's kind of important, right? And it explains what's going on here. So this is really where the tension lies. It's not, the tension isn't as it isn't as noteworthy in some of those other minor textual variants that we were looking at. This one gets this is in the weeds, right? And thus the reason why the paralytic was hoping for someone to put him there when the waters stirred. Exactly, right? So there's reason for adding it. If that were originally there, you really got to ask yourself, like, why was it taken out in that early stage? Like, what was the objection of some scribe that would say, like, I don't want that angel there, right? Like that, it would be pretty significant. Moving on to the book of Acts, we have Acts 8:37. And Philip said, if thou believest with all thy heart, thou mayest get baptized, right? And he answered and said, I believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. So this one is real, like this one's really important, right? Like this is one where if you're reading the New American Standard or any new Bible that's based on the updated Greek, it's going to say that as they went along the road, they came to some water, and the eunuch said, look, water, what prevents me from being baptized? Like, what do I need? Tikoli me baptistine, right? Like, what do I need to do to get baptized? And then it moves on to verse 38, and he ordered that the chariot stop, and they both went down into the water, and Philip as well as the eunuch, and he baptized him. So in other words, like, if you're going with the critical text, the short version without verse 37, he just says, what do I need to do to be baptized? And they're like, stop, baptize him, done, right? Nothing, no intermediary, like there's no response, right? It's just like, it's action, and he just does it. In this traditional Byzantine version, Philip said, if thou believest with all thine heart, thou mayest. And he answered, he answered and said, I believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. So first of all, you have a response to the question that you have to believe with all your heart, right? Ipistevis ex olis tis kardias existing. And you have his response affirming pistevo ton ion tu theou ine ton isun Christon. So I affirm, I believe, I have faith in Jesus as the Son of God. So this is like reflective of what the practice of believer baptism was, right? So kind of a big deal. This one you can't just kind of gloss this over as like an insignificant textual variant. It's a major textual variant. It has doctrinal implications. Very rare for that to be the case. Most textual variants are insignificant. This one's pretty significant, right? And Philip said, if thou believest with all thy heart, thou mayest. So why would this be omitted? Absent from the earliest witnesses, right? P45 doesn't have it. P47 doesn't have it. Codex Sinaiticus, Alexandrinus doesn't have it. It first appears in the 6th century, if you're looking at all the historical record, and then in some later manuscripts. The earliest citation of this is Irenaeus in the 2nd century, quoting part of it. So it's pretty old, right? So it's pretty ancient tradition. But it's not in Lucan style, and they're indicating that by the phrase "ton I sun Christon" is uncharacteristic. So the Jesus Christ, or I don't know. That's you'd have to be do a lot of analysis on Lucan style, but basically, I would assume that you just couldn't find this phrase elsewhere in Luke. It's the first time you used it. And then Western edition. So Metzger comments that there's no reason scribes would omit it if it were original, right? There's weak support. It's a voice from a later age. And that is really the strongest case, is that this profession of faith, like the question of like, what is the requirement what's the requirement for me to be baptized? You need to believe. Oh, okay, then I believe, right? Like it conforms so well to mainline, or to Orthodox Christian doctrine, that it's quite unfathomable why a scribe would omit it. That's really the logic here, right? Scribes felt that Philip baptizing the Ethiopian without ones seemed incomplete. That's why they would have added it. So it's very easy to explain why someone would put that in there. It's a very Christian verse. It works. It's great. It's like it's likely began as a liturgical marginal note that somebody put in the margins, basically. Like they saw that the way this scene is depicted in the critical text now in modern Bibles is that like he like raises his hand like, hey, what do I need to do to be baptized? And then there's no response. He just stops. He baptizes him. It's done. Right. You can imagine why somebody would put in the margin, well, he needs to confess. He needs to acknowledge that he believes. You need to put the confession in there. You can see there's a really nice explanation for why it would be added, not a good explanation for why it would be removed. We'll stop there and move on to the next one, which is Acts 15:34. So we're gonna jump into Acts 15, boom, down to 34. So here we have. And how are we doing on time? Okay, I think we'll stop at 3 hours for this one. Notwithstanding, it pleased Silas to abide there still, right? Edoxedeto sila epimene aftu. So this is going to skip in modern Bibles from verse 30 to 33, skipping over 34 to 35. So after they had spent time there, they were sent away from the brothers and sisters in peace to those who had sent them out. But Paul and Barnabas stayed in Antioch, teaching and preaching the word of the Lord with so many others. So it's skipping over this. Notwithstanding, it pleased Silas to abide there still. So here we have, again, my custom note that's available on the basic tier. You can take your own custom notes. Notwithstanding, it pleased Silas to abide there still. It was omitted. It's absent in the earliest witnesses, including even the majority text. So even Byzantine witnesses take this out. It appears in later Greek manuscripts in multiple inconsistent forms. So some of them say Silas remained there. Some of them say Silas remained and Judas journeyed alone. There's a diversity of readings, which indicates that it's probably secondary origin. Secondary gloss, Codex Bezae gives the expanded form. Only omission explains all the divergent additions. So the best explanation that the textual critics can come up with is that it was just later added, right? Verse 33 says Judas and Silas were sent away. Verse 40 has Paul choosing Silas as his companion. The copyist felt compelled to fix the story so that Silas would still be present in Antioch, right? It's a marginal clarification. Somebody probably wrote it into the margin and then it was copied into the text because the later copyist saw the marginal note, assumed it was original, and it's an editorial patch that smooths over the narrative and it got inserted. There's plenty of reason to assume that it was added. Hard to explain why it would be removed. Moving on to Acts 24:6b, omitting 7 and 8a. So this is like the largest chunk that we've seen. Boom, boom. So what you have here is an omission at the end of verse 6, a complete omission of verse 8, and then an omission at the beginning of verse 9, right? And so here we have who also hath gone about to profane the temple, whom we took and would have judged according to our law, right? So that end part was omitted from the critical text, but the chief captain Lysias came up upon us and with great violence took him away out of our hands, commanding his accusers to come unto thee by examining of whom thyself mayest take knowledge of all these things whereof we accuse him. So here, let's skip right to the note. It's absent from the earliest and best witnesses, including Alexandrian, Western, and Byzantine. Again, we have those text types. The addition changes the reference in verse 8 from Paul to Lysias, or Lysias. Expansion looks like an editorial attempt to smooth the narrative. Metzger mentions that the abruptness of ekratisamen, so we seized, may have prompted the expansion, and the external evidence is absolutely conclusive against inclusion of this verse, or this collection of verses, the verse, and then a little bit before and a little bit after it. The expansion adds nothing truly new. And copyists sense that there was a hiatus between Paul's arrest in verse 6 and Felix's examination in verse 8. So it's inserted, the inserted materials fills in details from Acts 21:30, 31 and forward, and 23 and 23. Acts 23:20, verse 23. Lysias intervening, the case sent to governor, and the stylistic polishing for narrative completeness. So again, it's a later explanatory expansion. There's a good explanation for why it would be added. It's not really clear why it would be removed, and it is absent from a lot of manuscripts, and therefore it's leading them to conclude that it's probably not original, right? Oh, hello, Neo Prototype. Thank you for joining late. And yeah, you can go back and rewatch this when it's over. And obviously, anybody who wants to catch up and get into a lot of detail, I have this blog post here for the Codex Sinaiticus and the critical text. This will have a link to watch the video. The video link is also in the description. So if you haven't seen that video, the video explains how we ended up in this mess with these 16 missing verses. So here, let's look at the New American Standard. So the New American Standard is jumping from 28 to 30, right? Therefore, let it be known to you that this salvation of God has been sent to the Gentiles, ta ethne. They will also listen. Now, Paul stayed 2 full years in his own rented lodging and welcomed all who came to him. So this sort of zooms out from Paul speaking to saying then, that narratively, he was there for 2 years, right? Whereas after verse 28 in the King James, you get 29, where it says, and when he had said these words, the Jews departed and had great reasoning among themselves, right? So this is still sort of zoomed out narratively. It's saying that the Jewish leaders departed and they had great reasoning among themselves. Let's take a look at the note. So it's absent from the earliest witnesses, P74, Sinaiticus, Vaticanus, Alexandrinus. It's found mainly in Western and Byzantine witnesses. So here the Western text is actually corroborating the Byzantine text, and it's a later tradition. Secondary line added to resolve the abrupt jump between 28 and 30. So there, like I said, this is just sort of it's, you can see that it's kind of when they say, let's see, let's look at that again. Let's look at this again. So they're saying that it's smoothing it out when you say, but it be it known therefore unto you that the salvation of God is sent unto the Gentiles and that they will hear it. So this is Paul announcing, as he's leaving, like, this is what's going on. This is the thing. And when he had said these words, so we're continuing the narrative here, the Jews departed and had great reasoning among themselves. And then it zooms out even further and says, Paul dwelt 2 whole years in his in his own hired house and received all that came unto him while he was still in Rome, right? So it's pretty clear why, like narratively, we're sort of zoomed in on the scene, Paul's talking. Then we get what happens next, right? And the Jews depart, and it's like it flows. Like this verse 29 fits very nicely here, because otherwise you're very abruptly, like what the critical text is saying is that the author of Acts went from Paul making this declaration to then just like Paul dwelt for 2 years in his, dwelt 2 years in his own hired house. So you can see why somebody would have added this verse, right? They're saying like it just is Luke's original text moves directly from Paul's declaration and then 2 years of ministry. Copyists felt that the transition was too abrupt. They supply a wrap-up line echoing verses 24 and 25. The Jews disagreed among themselves, right? Example of scribes smoothing endings for narrative closure, right? So a good explanation for why it would be inserted, not a very good explanation for why it would be taken out. Again, it's not that the modern Bibles are taking this out because they don't like it and it doesn't work and it's not good. It's great. There's a reason why it's there. And they're supposing that the reason it's there is because it was added to make it a little bit smoother, right? They're favoring the more difficult reading where it's not there. And you have to deal with this big jump, right? And if you take the traditional approach, you're going to say that, no, it was always there. And there's just all these early manuscripts that are taking it out maliciously. We don't really have a good explanation for why it was taken out, right? So here, this is an interesting one. This is one that makes it very, very difficult to incorporate different versions of Romans 16 in a way that aligns, because here you have at the end of Romans in 16, in the King James, Paul says, Gaius, mine host, and the whole church saluteth you. Erastus, the chamberlain of the city, saluteth you, and Quartus, a brother. The grace of our Lord Jesus Christ be with you all. Amen, right? Amen. So this ending here, Icharistu Kyriou imon Isu Christou metatpandon imon. Amen. This tends to get this verse 24 either gets moved around or omitted. It's a real tough one. Let's take a look at the note. So it's absent from the earliest and best witnesses, the sort of like wrapping up, right? It's a duplicate of the benediction that's already found in verse 20. So if it's original, then he's saying it twice, right? This benediction. It's likely a scribal duplication of liturgical addition carried into the Byzantine tradition because it sounds good to say it this way in church and like in the liturgy in a lectionary version of the Bible that then ends up being the standard version. It's the earliest and best manuscripts omitted, and it's paralleled in verse 20, right? Like the examples of manuscripts resisting the liturgical expansion. Omission reflects the harder reading, right? It's like it flows nicely. It's nice to have him giving this benediction twice, but we can imagine, maybe there was only one in the original. The verse may have been borrowed from 1620 and copied into the marginal note, and then ended up in the main body of the text. It provides a formal amen conclusion to the chapter, right? Especially in lectionary or liturgical use. So it's not original to Romans, is the conclusion of the scholars, and it's a later liturgical edition, and modern Bibles omit it from the main text and footnote it as a variant. And it creates this sort of very disjointed ending when you're comparing these different versions, where 23 jumps to 25, and then 26 and 27 end up kind of out of whack, right? Whereas at the ending of 27 says, to God only wise be glory through Jesus Christ forever, amen, right? So Icharistu Kyriou imon Iesou Christou metapando nimon is this the grace of Jesus, of our Lord Jesus Christ be with you all, amen. It's omitted because we got it here, right? In verse 20, and the God of peace shall bruise Satan under your feet. The grace of our Lord Jesus Christ be with you. Amen. Right? We have it exactly here. Icharistu Kyriou imon, Iesou Christou methimon. So they just figured, well, it's probably just duplicating that, which here we have metapanda imon, so with all of you, and here we have methimon, with you, right? Slightly different, but repetitive, right? So that's their conclusion. Now, to wrap up this whole study on missing verses, right? And again, watch the video for more detail. If I remember, that omitted verse was added to give Silas a situation wherein he would later become Paul's new traveling companion. Yeah, that makes sense. So going to 1 John 5:7. Now here we have the famous comma Johannium, right? So reading through 6, 7, and 8, where 7 tends to be shortened, right? This is not a missing verse, by the way. Verse 7 is there. It's the ending of verse 7. So this is kind of like an exception to our rule of missing verses. It's not a missing verse. It's a missing part of a verse. So this is he that came by blood, by water and blood, even Jesus Christ, not by water only, but by water and blood. And it is the Spirit that beareth witness, because the Spirit is truth. For there are 3 that bear record in heaven, full stop: the Father, the Word, and the Holy Ghost. And these 3 are one. Big time right there, right? Otitrisesin y martirundes en tu urano. Right? There are 3 who witness in heaven: Opatir, the Father; O Logos, the Word; και το Άγιον Πνεύμα, and the Holy Spirit; και ούτι οι 3 εν isi. Right? So and thus the 3 are one, not there, right? And this is the tricky thing. This is like, okay, it's absent from all Greek manuscripts before the 16th century. Only 8th century late manuscripts included, mostly in marginal notes, right? So they're taking, it's an afterthought, not original, not quoted by any Greek fathers, even during the Trinitarian controversies, where it would have been decisive, right? If that were there, you bet they would have been quoting it, right? It's missing from all the ancient versions. It's missing from Syriac, Coptic, Armenian, Ethiopic, Arabic, Slavonic. It's only found in late Latin tradition. The reason it is cemented in these Bibles is because the Catholics had it there for a really, really long time. And it was very like affirmative. Like this was a Trinitarian. This was like the only Trinitarian verse, explicitly Trinitarian verse in the Bible. There's a really good reason to want it to be there, right? Like it's spurious. It has no right to stand in the New Testament. Metzger is really, really adamant about it. Alon seconds that it's secondary beyond question. The NA26 apparatus itself is sufficient proof, right? Like if you just look at the apparatus under the comma Johannium, it's really, really hard to get a consensus on scholarship for a lot of these things. This one really does get a pretty firm consensus that it originated as a late Latin marginal gloss. It's interpreting the Spirit, the water, and the blood as symbols of the Trinity, and then it's quoted in late 4th century Latin treatise, which is it's pretty early, by the way. Like late 4th century is pretty early, but it's adopted in Old Latin and later Vulgate copies. It was popularized in the medieval Latin West, not in the Greek East. The Greek Orthodox Church did not have this It entered the Textus Receptus because Erasmus was reluctantly added it in later editions after pressure, right? Because the Catholics really wanted that. Like, how dare he take it out? Well, he took it out because he just couldn't find it, right? It appeared in a marginal note of manuscript 61 and Codex Montfortianus of the 16th century, and it's a later Latin doctrinal gloss, elevated to canonical status in the medieval period, and modern Bibles omit it from the text and often mention it in a footnote. It's the last one that we're going to review today, and it's a clincher, right? The Trinitarian interpolation. It's the Comma Johannium. Very, very famous, very controversial. Witch Doctor just received the timeline poster, and it's awesome. Thank you, Witch Doctor. He placed an order online. Again, if you go to the store, you can order yourself a poster. Every purchase helps, guys. Every little bit helps. Every subscription helps. And Witch Doctor, sign up for the $5 a month subscription if you haven't already, and start adding your notes. Again, it's like those are your personal notes. Like the notes that I was reading in today's stream, those are all notes that I put together for this presentation. And just as a demonstration, right? So if I go to the Bible Reader, and let's say I'm going to go and I'm going to look at let's do it here, right? In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. I not only, so like, let's have a little fun. So I'm going to add another version, and I'm going to flip the orientation, and I'm going to compare the NIV, and let's grab the Hebrew text. Let's drop the Hebrew text in here. So if I want to share Genesis 1:1 on social media, I can click on the number 1, and I can click here, and I can copy it. And let's see, I'm going to share it in the chat. I don't know. Yeah, boom. Okay. So what I just shared in the chat is what I just copied, right? It's going to show me the NIV. It's going to show me the ASV. I could do this in, and it's going to, oh, wait. Yeah. Okay. So sorry. So one of the things that's going to be fixed in the next version. Yeah. So this is, sorry. I'm embarrassing myself here. So what I shared in the chat is actually a comparison of the NIV and the ASV. And this is very important, because right now what you have to do is you have to hit the refresh button in order to get that to update. So this was so now if I copy it, now I can share it in the chat, and I'm going to get the Hebrew included, right? And it's going to give you the correct link that's not going to point at the ASV. You have to refresh the browser to update that link. I already flagged that. My developer already fixed it. And I think in the next week or so, we're going to roll out an improvement. So that's fixed. Sorry, at the demoing an error. But if you are logged in on the $5 a month plan, you can open up this thing. You can take a note. So like note taking. This is a note to help me explain the Bible. Please sign up. So here I can go in, I can make this a heading. I can make this italic. I can create a hyperlink. I can do all of this stuff to then save it and have it be a permanent fixture when I'm looking at this verse. And eventually you're going to be able to come into your advanced search panel, and you're going to be able to look through we're going to create a dashboard where all of your notes, all of your bookmarks, and everything's going to be in one place for you to organize it. So that if you're doing a live stream and you want to illustrate your own lesson of, something about the Bible, you can do it from your own custom notes, right? So like, and it's meant to be like very presentable on screen, so that, you could then come the next time that you go into Genesis 1:1, your note is still there, right? This is a note, right? So boom. Now the heading. So what I showed here is like I had formatting, right, for the heading. This formatting's not coming through in this display in this version, but next week this is going to be fixed. And you click. Oh, you click the number. Yeah. Click the number. And then, yeah, you may have to refresh in order to get the exact comparison that you did. But yeah, you can do it in English, Hebrew, Greek all at once. You can put them all on the same layout. Refresh it just to make sure it fixes. This is a workaround right now. And then click the social media. So like let's do this again. So I'm going to demonstrate this. So I'm going to compare the NIV. Well, actually, let's Tyndale. Okay, I'm going to compare Tyndale to the King James, and I'm going to add a Greek version. Let's see. I'm going to add let's see the Septuagint. I'm going to add Ralph's Septuagint, and I'm going to flip the orientation so that they're stacked on top of each other. So now I have Tyndale and I have the King James and I have the Septuagint. And let's say I'm gonna focus it on, I'm gonna pin verse 6. So basically what I want to share Genesis 1:6 in these three versions that are stacked horizontally, not vertically. I'm gonna hit the refresh button, which again, is a temporary workaround for getting everything up to date. Then I'm gonna click on the number. I'm gonna click on the social media sharing feature, and then I'm gonna go into the chat and I'm gonna drop it. And sorry, it broke it up in the chat. But basically, yeah, you can do this on Facebook, you can do this on Twitter, you can do this anywhere. And this is a social media sharing feature that just automatically copies to your clipboard those whatever versions you have on the layout. That's going to copy them. It's going to put a URL in there, and anybody that clicks on the URL is going to jump to Cross Bible to see exactly the versions that you're seeing. So it's the social media sharing feature. Again, it requires a refresh to get the latest version that you add if you're comparing multiple versions. So make sure you refresh. But that's something that we're really a feature we're really proud of, and helps people sort of engage on Twitter, on Facebook, on Discord, wherever you're, yeah, well, interesting features indeed. And we're also open to feedback from people who are using, if you're subscribed, if you're using the, the $5 a month version or the $10 a month version, we're open to people using those and giving us feedback. And if you can afford to be on the patron tier, by all means, like we really welcome that. We're building out a lot of cool things like our Learn Greek feature. So again, we got, Learn Greek the easy way. We have a glossary that has basically, this is a glossary that I put together of English words with their modern Greek and ancient Greek equivalents. Some of them don't have ancient Greek versions. Like I manually put together this glossary over a period of about 4 years, of basically every new word that I learned in Greek, I put in here. This is sort of like the first 4,000 words that anybody like that, that my son said when he was growing up, I put in here. So this is like very, very common everyday vocabulary that you can use, and that is going to sort of high frequency words, and you can search for them here. So you can search for the word bowl, or whatever, just any word you can search, that it pulls it up right away, and you can see, pins in a bowling alley. Doesn't have there are a lot of words like bowling alley that obviously they exist in modern Greek and they don't exist in ancient Greek. So in my opinion, if you learn a language, you got to learn how to say bowling, right? Maybe it's just the English version, because otherwise, how are you going to watch, Big Lebowski and know what's going on? We got pronunciation. So I have a pronunciation module where you can play audio that I'm actually I did all of the examples here. So I have example words. You can click and listen to me say these words. I have verb conjugation charts that I'm going to be adding more verbs to in modern Greek and ancient Greek, with all of the Greek terminology that you can hover over. So this Greek module is still a work in progress. I'm going to, have lots of noun paradigms, pronouns, adjectives. So this is the foundation of the upcoming Greek module that we're working on. I believe this is available right now on the $20 tier, because we're just testing it out. So I don't want to roll it out to the general public. But for the $5 a month tier, you can do the, the note taking the bookmarking and the highlighting pretty soon. I'm sorry, highlighting will be available soon. But for the bookmarking, it's just create your own custom categories and bookmark all over your Bible, right? Yeah, and it could be great to have a 10-second ad for the live streams, wink, wink, talking about the Greek and Greek lessons. Yeah, and I do a Greek lesson every Friday at 11 a.m. It's a group lesson, so people can come and sort of it's kind of like these live streams, but it's interactive. So I would love to get more people hop into that lesson. I don't do privates anymore because just I can't manage it in my schedule. But that's it. So if anybody has any questions, now is your chance to drop it in the chat. Otherwise, have a wonderful rest of your weekend, everybody. And thank you for joining. And I will see you in the next one.